Welcome to our fourth annual Asia Society at the Sundance Film Festival program. This year, we're featuring 7 films and 18 speakers across 6 countries. We have enabled live transcription for this program, so if you'd like to opt in, click on the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and then click Show Subtitles. Let's kick off now with our Global Asia Society President and CEO, Kevin Rudd, who is joining us from Australia with pre-recorded remarks. Let's hear now from Kevin.
Greetings and welcome. My name is Kevin Rudd. I'm President and Global CEO of the Asia Society. We're thrilled to be here at Sundance Film Festival once again, in fact, for the 4th year in a row. And we're proud to be here to host in collaboration with our centers in Northern California, in Southern California, New York, and with Asia Society at the Movies. We honor the filmmakers, producers, writers, and talent who are here telling their stories. And we're excited to meet and to get to know each and every one of you. We want to be able to be with you in screening your films at the Asia Society. Just 1 year ago, in January 2021, we launched our new series called Asia Society at the Movies. We've screened nearly 25 films so far and organized over 40 related programs with live, in-person, virtual audiences. These films have included Ascension, Blue Bayou, White Tiger, Who Killed Vincent, In the Heights, Over the Moon and Amy Chan, Unintended Memoir, which premiered here last year at the festival. Asia Society at the Movies is an ongoing series of film screenings and conversations showcasing a broad range of work and filmmakers from across Asia and the Asian diaspora. We celebrate established and emerging voices, contemporary and classic films, and documentaries. Our work strives to deepen understanding of Asian cultures, which is a core part of the Asia Society's mission since our creation back in 1956. We're aligned with Sundance in this regard and support the festival for having a core value of diversity, reflected in the enormous diversity of film at this wonderful festival. We've had a long and rich history of film programming. Many of these events, galas, and screenings have been led by the wonderful and talented Janet Yang, who is moderating our panel discussion today. With that, let's get to our program. Thank you again, Sundance. Thank you, Janet, and thank all of you for being with us. Congratulations to all the films and filmmakers premiering at Sundance, and enjoy the panel discussion.
Our thanks to Kevin. We are coming to you now live on the official Sundance Film Festival platform, which is in its 2nd virtual year. We are very grateful to be back. I'm Margaret Conley from the Asia Society Northern California Center, and our team could not do this program without the support of our sponsors. We are so grateful to Julia Gao, who supports this program and also hosted an in-person dinner in Los Angeles over the weekend with us and some of the filmmakers. Our New York Global Arts team also supports us with their Asia Society at the Movie series. And Josh Elks from Harbor. He's been with us from the very beginning. Josh is here now. Would you like to say a few words, Josh?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's an honor to be back, and hopefully next year in person together. But this is certainly amazing to see happening either way. And just a brief few words. I'm a proud supporter of the Asia Society. As Margaret mentioned, this is our 4th year doing this panel together, and we look forward to the 5th. I'm also the co-founder and CEO of Harbor. We're an e-signature platform built for the creator economy. And I just wanted to say that this has been a year when creativity and collaboration has faced incredibly strong headwinds. And I'm beyond proud to see this amazing group of panelists who have persevered, and I'm thankful that even though virtual, we're all able to gather from all over the world to experience, support, and learn from a group of innovative new filmmakers together, even though we're not in person. So against all odds, here we are, and I'm so proud to be doing this again together. So thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Josh. 4 years in a row. Our mission at Asia Society is to amplify voices from Asia, and the films we're featuring are from a diverse range of countries: Korea, Myanmar, the Philippines, China, Japan, and Vietnam. To tell you more about them is Janet Yang. She's the one who's curated our lineups for the past 4 years. Each year, she makes every event bigger, and we are so grateful to her for all that she does for this program. If you'd like to ask Janet or any of our filmmakers questions during the program, please use the Q&A box. This year, we're featuring 7 films. 3 of them we're going to be reviewing live right now. The other 4 we did as pre-recorded sessions with Janet, and those videos will be available on our Asian Society Northern California website. You can also find all speaker bios in depth on our website, including Janet's. Now, please welcome Emmy Award and Golden Globe winning Hollywood producer and member of the Board of Governors of the Motion Picture Academy, Janet Yang.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Josh. I'm truly excited to be here with you all today because, as Margaret mentioned, we have films that represent so many different countries, but also so many different genres this year. And we go back in time, we go forward in time. And the breadth of the films that are now shown at Sundance that have some sort of Asian sensibility or talent involved has just grown exponentially, which is why this program can grow. We're going to start today with the film After Yang. Let's see a brief little description of After Yang and the filmmakers involved with it. So this is the second feature of the director Kogonada. I'm told I can call him K. And it has in its cast 2 incredible actors, Justin Min and Malaya. They're going to join us as well, I hope. And here they go, Justin and Malaya. So Kogonada, I have been a huge admirer of your films since your first Columbus, which starred John Cho. I remember rushing to a theater when I saw that John was going to be the lead and not just the fake starring John Cho meme that was going around at the time. Maybe Columbus started that meme because finally he did get a lead role and we were thrilled about that. But tell us about the origin of this particular film and why you set about going to make quote unquote After Yang. And I take some pride in the title, of course.
Yeah, Teresa Park, which is one of our producers, I met her in New York. She had seen a Columbus and wanted to meet. And, you take a lot of meetings and there's a lot of like, oh, what can be done? And you walk away and usually it was great to meet. But Teresa, if you've ever met her, she's a like if she says, oh, I want to, and she was like, I want to make a film with you. We're going to make this happen. She gave me some material. She said, any material. And she handed me this collection of shorts by Alexander Weinstein. She had one short that I think she had already optioned and I had read it. And then she said, if there's any other shorts there that you're interested in. And I said, oh, this Saying Goodbye to Yang, which was just a sort of quiet, sci-fi, and it just takes over a place in a day. And I just said that I could imagine making something out of that. And I mean, within a week, I think, it was not long before we had a meeting and it started happening. So it really came from this little short. It also came from Teresa, just like once I met her, I said, yeah, let's try to make something happen. But really this short was the spark.
And what about the short gave you that?
Yeah, I mean, it was such a grounded sci-fi. I know people talk about it, but really it was just so ordinary in some ways. It was just about a day in the life of this family and really this father who was dealing with, in his mind, it wasn't even a death, it was, it was just like a malfunctioning appliance. And this, as he's sort of starting to recall this robot, it really begins to open him up. Like Yang becomes almost a mirror to what is passing by him. And I just thought it was just so really lovely way of almost the discovery of loss. Like often when you deal with a film about loss, we all know it's loss, but here, it takes almost a journey for him to really confront the loss that this malfunctioning robot really is to him, and really begins to see that relationship so differently.
Mm. So you set about to write a script, obviously, after you were able to get the option. What was it like? What kind of changes did you feel you had to make to the short story to develop it as a full-length feature?
Yeah, like I said, the story took place in a day, and it was really just flashbacks to memory. And I knew I just wanted to deal with memory a little bit differently, So, the thing that I was sort of, thematically, the sense of time and memory and place and loss, those were the things that were really stirring within me when I read it. And the thing I loved about this was that they weren't just ideas or abstract themes, but it were really grounded in family. And I thought, oh, I love a family drama. I'm just a big fan of Ozu. And I just thought, I'm really going to focus on the family. And so I knew I just wanted to expand every character. I knew that I wanted Yang to ultimately have a voice, and for him to be part of the vehicle of revealing our sense of time. And also, it was written by Alexander, who's not Asian, but, it was different once I thought about like an Asian robot and this construct of Asianness. And in a very weird, but maybe not so weird way, I felt like I could identify with him as a Asian American, someone caught in between. Like in some ways, his own feeling of alienation or his own construct and his own desire to really have a memory, a taste of Asianness. Anyway, I think that part I even wrote into it because once I started thinking like, is he even Asian? Is he's a sort of manufactured Asian? I'm sure, that's a question that a lot of us ask, are we Asian enough? What does it mean? So there was something even within that part of the story that I thought, I'm going to dig a little deeper into what that even means.
That is quite profound, I think, because many of us in the Asian American community are really contemplating our dual identities, or in some cases more than dual, triple, quadruple, and what does it really mean? And I think during the pandemic, and also with the rise of AI, these are questions that are just constantly swirling around us. What does it really mean? Can robots love? And you gave us such a wonderful base to further contemplate these issues. I also wanted to comment on something you just said, which is, I did not know that Ozu was a direct influence of yours, but your exquisite framing, the stillness of the camera did remind me a lot of Ozu, and I can see that that was definitely something conscious. Are there other filmmakers that were highly influential to you?
Yeah, I mean, like Edward Yang, Hu Shaoxin. I mean, there's so many. I am very deeply inspired by Asian cinema. And I think that is, again, talking about like your connection and this desire for a kind of memory or a sense of being. There was something about Asian cinema, because I, like a lot of cinephiles, kind of came through the route of European cinema. I loved Truffaut, I loved Godard. I kind of went that path. And then really when I started getting exposed to Asian cinema, it had a different kind of effect on me, almost like a kind of memory, a vicarious, and it made me think about my parents in a different way, because they were carrying all this history with them that I had kind of, as a child, you don't really always pay attention to until you're older and you're confronted by something that gives you a sense of memory. And then so it was, there's so many, I don't want to bore everyone, but they're embodied even behind me, I've just, they mean a lot beyond just film or a collection, but something that really has helped me wrestle with who I am in this world, and just beyond Asian identity, just what it means to be in this world and how to process it. So.
It's interesting because a couple of the other filmmakers that I've spoken to also cited Hou Xiaoxian and Edward Yang as great influences on them. And I think that's something that's been very meaningful to me and others I know, is that we can look to Asia as a touchstone. Although I grew up in this country, going back to China gave me so much more understanding of parts of me. Now you, I just learned, you were born in Korea. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I was born in Korea. We were an immigrant family, and my I kind of grew up in a very working class environment. But my parents were, my mom was from North Korea, and she was, they had kind of their story, which in many ways. Is kind of like the Yang story. I think in many ways, we have these Yangs all around us who have their whole history, and we just don't pay attention to it, And as it was like a late discovery for me to open up my parents and realize, like, oh, they're not just this like my parents, but they had these stories that of time and love and loss, and that's what I kind of started discovering. So, we came here and I just saw them as this hard working class family, but they always talked to me about art. There was a moment when I would watch a film and they would say, oh, that's Alain Delon. And I would be like, wait, how do you even know that? And they were like real cinephiles. And my mom was very well known for this Japanese aesthetic in Korea. But to me, we were just working class, we were just struggling, but we'd have these conversations. So, and that was just, we came here, and then my dad had a real, like, the Japanese culture was a part of, also I knew that was something that was a part of his history, but I didn't really realize it until I was older, how complicated that was for him. So much of even now in the films that I make and the films that I love are about kind of extracting my own, my own sense of self and family and being human.
One of the reasons you have a Japanese sounding name?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think as we all become better educated in our past, we've definitely seen how history is taught in a very biased way. We'll be able to, as you say, extract much more of our influences, and it doesn't necessarily have to be from Asia, but the full picture. When we read about, for instance, Japanese occupation of Korea, it's a byline. It's something said in passing. We don't really fully understand the influence on so many people's lives and the complexity of what that is to have different cultures intermingle and how to maybe feel a combination of affection and revulsion or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything is so simplified. And that's been a real tragedy for many of us who are seeking the fullness of our identities, is that we don't get all the pieces until we really dig.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the, because I like that tension in me. I'm proudly Korean and I'm proudly Asian. I think the one thing about being part of the diaspora is that as much as we are floating in between worlds, there's an opportunity really to have a larger sense of Asianness in a way that histories sometimes make it difficult to really kind of make those connections. And I think that tension, and like you say, the countering the simplification of what it means, and even those histories, which were also largely influenced by Western empires that were kind of creating, imposing ideas also. So it's been good and something that ongoing for me, I think. Yeah.
Well, we're so lucky to have your voice and your creativity in the mix to help us explore this very, very layered territory of different cultures. I want to turn now to Justin, who many people know from Umbrella Academy, but who is Yang. We're my brother, Justin. What was it like for you to join Kogonada on this project?
It was an absolute dream come true. I have been a fan of Kogonada's work. Even before Columbus, I had followed his visual essays and then obviously watched Columbus and was so moved by that. And so when the opportunity came along to read for this part and read for him, I jumped on the chance. And so you know, that cliche phrase of like, never meet your idols because they never live up to who you think they are. Like that wasn't the case here. He was everything I thought he would be, and just a complete visionary. And what an honor and a joy to be a part of this story and part of his work. So I have nothing but really incredibly fond memories of the time that we shot this film, now almost over 2 years ago.
And have you wanted to be an actor for a long time, or did you have to go through a phase where you were pre-med and then like so many Asian actors? I've heard the story so many times. That's why I just had to put it out there.
No, I jumped around. I had quite a sort of a curious and exploratory personality. So throughout college, I've sort of dabbled in a lot of different fields. I started off kind of going into law for a second.
Not pre-med, but law. See, I knew there was something.
But actually, that was very self-inflicted. That was something I really wanted to try and do because I thought I would like it. Lo and behold, I didn't. And then I sort of dabbled in international nonprofit work, which I did for quite a long time. And then I did some journalism. And I think the through line in retrospect from all of these different jobs that I held was the power of storytelling. And I think that sort of led me to try acting for a bit. And when I got a taste of it, I ended up really enjoying it. And that's sort of been the journey ever since.
Your performance was so nuanced and so exquisite because you were a robot, but you were a robot who we learned had heart. And I was just really appreciating how you walked that fine line. What were some of the tricks or things that you told yourself to do or not to do when you were preparing for this role? How did you study for it, or how did you, give such a pitch perfect performance?
I appreciate that. I think a lot of that is really, again, due to Kognata's direction, as well as the amazing cast members, one of whom is also here, Malaya. There was a lot of discussion at the beginning in terms of how robot-like the character would be versus how human. And I think Kay was very strategic in the way of not giving me a full, clear answer. And the fact that we would sort of explore and find it together as we went along. And interestingly enough, when I first auditioned for it, I wasn't aware that he was a robot. I had just been given one scene. I believe it was that scene with Yang's character and Micah's character at the orchard. And there was nothing explicit in that audition that he was a robot. And it was just this conversation between an older brother and a sister. And so I played it like a human being, like an older brother would play it to a younger sister. And I think that really helped me, because that's one of the things that I think Kay connected to in my audition. So we wanted to figure out a way to keep that bond between the siblings and between the family, and yet still have moments where you're not quite sure how human this character is. And this discussion about Asian identity is so vast when it comes to this script and this movie. And for me, growing up, there were so many moments where so many things were left unsaid in my family. I think it's a part of Asian culture to not say a lot of things, and you can sort of say so much in unspoken silences or through just a look. I remember, like, sometimes my family we could understand fully what each other was feeling and thinking just by a simple look. And so I wanted to sort of bring that sense of there's something always underneath, even though I'm not trying to give anything necessarily away in facial expression. So that was something I really wanted to tap into as well. And I would say the last thing, I just really tried to fill Yang with as much life underneath and secrets as possible. I mean, obviously the most obvious secret of all spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it yet, is the fact that he has these previous lives. And that was one secret that I think he held, but I think there are so many other secrets that I sort of kept inside as we filmed to just have underneath.
Well, I think other actors who've come before talked about always having that secret, Meryl Streep being one of them, always having a secret that's not revealed. But you had many secrets, and to tie it to the Asian culture or psychology and the way that we communicate is so touching for me personally, because I think we all struggle for how to enjoy silences and the negative space and not talking about things, but also when it's necessary to speak up. And I think we're all trying to find that right balance, because living in a Western society, it doesn't behoove us to not speak up. Right? And but to have those different layers in you as an actor, I think probably informed your performance so well, so richly. And I'll have to go read that short story now, but I don't know if that's something the author intended. Certainly, Kogonada seems to have drawn that theme out quite a bit. But yeah, there's many positive things about the flourishing of literature by or about Asians. I think that comes to light, and I just love seeing this adaptation of this short story to help us explore so much of what we experience on a day-to-day basis. Malaya, my dear young friend Malaya, who's 10 years old and is as mature as most adults that I know, if not more so. Malaya, tell us how you came to be part of this family, this very interesting family. At this point, we might as well have spoiler alerts, a white father, an African-American mother, and a Chinese daughter.
Sorry, can you say that again? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Yes, how is it that you came to be part of this family?
Well, my character...
The family, the family.
Kogonada said that he watched me singing the national anthem at an LA Galaxy game. And then after that, he contacted my agent for me to do an audition. And I didn't get the full script yet. I only got a few sides. And then, so I decided to read the short story so that I can know the personality of my character, Micah, and how I can portray her. And so I really liked the short story, and I felt like I could connect with it. And then I read the script, and Kogonada made it very beautiful. And I just really liked it. And then I did the audition, and Kogonada wanted to meet up with me and my family. And so then we talked about the movie, and we just talked a lot in general. And then, a few months later, I got a call from him saying that I got the part. And I guess it was just amazing because I got to work with so many amazing people like Justin, Kogonada, Jodie Turner-Smith, and Colin Farrell, and Haley Lou Richardson. So that was just how I got involved with it.
You were a little ahead of the game because Justin didn't know he was playing a robot, but you went and read the short story, so you knew, right?
Yeah.
Very tricky, Kay, to not tell Justin he was playing a robot and let him discover it on his own. And this is, I believe, your first feature film.
Mm-hmm.
How does it differ from the other performances that you've done before? Because you've been on stage, you've been in TV. Was there anything different about working on this film?
Yeah, so before this, I've been doing like Disney Channel shows, and I've always been pretty over the top, and I was always like exaggerating with my acting. And something that Kogonada actually taught me is that I sometimes have to tone it down a lot so that it can be more natural. So something I remember that Kogonada kept doing on set was tone it down, Malaya, tone it down.
That's interesting. Well, Kogonada's movies tend to be a little more toned down than others.
Yeah.
But to match with, I guess, the style and content of this particular movie. But you are so effervescent and effusive, and clearly when you sing and you belt out these songs, you need to put a lot of your energy in there. So now you get the full breadth of different kinds of performances. It's the film is so impressive. Can you tell people, Kay or others, what they can expect for the future of this? I believe A24 is already distributing it, but is there a date? Is there?
I think they've announced recently that they're gonna release it in March. So it's right around the corner. So
Excellent. Well, it's a film that everybody should see because it has so many interesting themes, and also just your visual style. Seeing the performances of Justin and Malaya and others are so extraordinary. It's worth, I think, repeat viewing. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we take questions from the audience, if there are questions?
No.
Well,
go ahead.
have a story, actually. So when we were filming this, I actually just lost my 2 front teeth. And so they were worried that my teeth would grow in the middle of filming. So I had to wear flippers. So I had to wear fake teeth. And it was not very comfortable. And I think it was also very hard because it was very fragile as well. So I had to take it off and put it on all the time. So that's just a fun fact.
Yeah.
That is a very fun fact. I would not have known that you had. How did you lose your front teeth?
Well, so I was 7 or 8, something like that when we were filming. So I just lost my teeth at school, and it was just my baby teeth. And that's why.
I forgot that you lose baby teeth around that age. Of course, there is that funny awkward stage where kids come out with a big gap. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
She was so remarkable, because those who are not comfortable, but everyone on both cast and crew would say Malaya was maybe the most professional of us all. She was just was so present and was so really, she was just really great. And really, I didn't, one of the things that impressed us, talking about tone down, the casting director, when the first time she auditioned her, and we didn't know she could act, she had all the parts memorized, and then the casting director gave her a couple notes about in her own language of bringing it down, and she was really it was remarkable. And I remember I did have a signal. I maybe less than saying tone down. I had the signal where I do this thing in my face, like this, and she immediately, she would just that was a signal, and she'd give me a take where it was a little bit more plain as, but I also think she's, undeniably precocious. It's like she reminded me of my nieces. Is partly why I wanted to hire her, because I think Micah is undeniably precocious, and you can feel that in her performance. It's really lovely.
No, I think she was born, as an adult.
It's pretty.
Perhaps at home she shows more childlike side, but so poised and so articulate. And
thank you.
Yeah, you're just a marvel, Malaya.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Justin, do you have anything you want to add to this conversation? I do have one question from an audience member, which we can get to in a minute.
No, not at the moment.
What else do you have coming up? Let's each of you just talk about that for a second, if you don't mind. What's on the horizon? Anything that you want to promote to your fans out here?
I am about to start filming a really exciting project that I don't.
You can't talk about.
If I'm allowed to talk about.
You're teasing us. That's not fair.
But it features some great Asian American cast members and
great
people involved. So I'm super excited.
When can we know more?
I would love to know as well.
Oh.
I would love to know as well.
All right. Well, we're happy that we're going to see more of you. in something, some unnamed thing. We'll look for it.
I'm really excited to Justin's career, which is in some ways just starting, although he really, with Umbrella Academy and everything really has started with an explosion. But the one thing, we're talking about keeping Yang a mystery, certainly to me, and we did want a robot that we didn't fully understand, and he, even in his audition, and even now you can see the thing about Justin, and that all I think really great actors have it, is that sort of they have a sense of mystery where you want to know more, like they have a world inside of them, so they can say a line, but in their eyes and their presence, there's a whole world, and that's who Justin is, because he has such a thought life and really introspective and curious. And even now, whenever I see him answer a question, I'm just like, who is Justin? I want to know Justin. And I think that's the, and it's the same way as he embodied Yang. It's like, you knew there was a world in him, even as he was answering questions, just in his eyes, you feel a world, you feel a world. And he's like that in real life too, which is really lovely.
As my friend Rosalind Chow said, yes, that he is like that in real life. What you see on camera is just a reflection of who he is in real life.
It is.
So, Kay, can you reveal anything about future projects, or is it not time yet?
Yeah, I think, there are a few things that I'm working on that I'm very excited about, but I can't, I can't say.
Okay. So actually there's two questions now. One has to do with
I should say that,
yes.
Pachinko, I was a part of the Pachinko team, which is a series for Apple Plus, and that should be coming out sometime this year as well.
Do you know when that's coming out?
I don't think I'm allowed to say, but yeah.
Geez, this is incredibly frustrating. No, but Pachinko is another much anticipated project. It's a very well-known novel that has been adapted. And so how many episodes of Pachinko did you do?
I did the pilot and 3 other episodes. So.
Fantastic. So very much has your fingerprint on it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different media series, but for sure. I mean, I think the real visionary behind that is Sue Hugh, who's the showrunner, and of course the author. There's so much time spent before I came in, but yeah, I was able to come in and really be a part of this team that really cared deeply about this world and project. Yeah.
It's hard to imagine a better director given your background.
Oh, thank you. That's appreciated.
So, and not just creatively, but also because culturally.
Right.
So one question is about Black Asian relations, and I'm not really sure if you have a strong opinion about that, but it's about, you say Asians opening business in Black communities and never give back, and then other people. There's a lot of there's tension, obviously, and then someone says, "Why is there no soul food restaurants in Chinatown?" And when mainstream minority films paint Asians in a negative light, how can we change that narrative as filmmakers? And it says, Crazy Rich Asians, Shang-Chi, though popular, don't address the reality of Asians living in America. Does anybody want to tackle that question? I mean, your movie has already taken a big step forward in terms of that, because it's all part of one family.
I will say, in regards to the Black Asian community, I think more than ever, because I do know that historically there's been tension and there can be racism among people of diversity, but I think more than ever, there has been a sense of coalition among the diverse. And I remember at the, it was one of the, maybe it was the Spirit Awards. I remember Ava or some coming to John Cho. At that moment, there was a Black Lives Matter movement, and she grabbed John Cho and whispered something to him. And John was just so, taken. And he said to me, she said, "We are all behind you, John. We want you to know," and I think this sort of new sense of people of color that we are all, regardless of our background. And I would say the same again with the diaspora of Asians, that we are in many ways, I think it's a shame if we tribalize ourselves even among the diverse, and that we would find unity there. And I feel that more than ever. I feel that more than ever. So
absolutely, we have more of a shared experience, and if we put all the minorities together, we're a majority, and there's strength of numbers. But there is a shared experience, and there's a lot that's very relatable. And
I love the family in Yang because it was very naturally a family. As much as it was Jody, and it just felt like that's possible. It's possible to have that in the future, and so that's. Yeah, that's great. I don't know if Justin or Malaya wants to talk about the representation or anything like that in films.
There's another question specifically for Justin.
Okay,
if
great.
You want to hear that. How do you transition from a desk traditional job to acting? How do you even start?
It's a great question. I can give my answer, but from every actor I've spoken to, I think every journey is unique. So unfortunately, it's not like most jobs where I can give you sort of a specific formula for success. It's an artistic craft in the way that it ebbs and flows, and there's ups and downs, and it's quite difficult. And sometimes you have no idea how it all works. But essentially, I came back to LA after graduating college and working in journalism for a couple of years, and was having a bit of an existential crisis in terms of what I wanted to do. And as I said before, I think I kept getting drawn back into some form of storytelling, and it wasn't some dramatic moment, but for whatever reason, it sounded like acting to me, because it sort of combined a lot of interests that I enjoyed, namely being up on stage, performing, entertaining, and also this aspect of storytelling. And so because of that, I thought I'd, just give it a go. And I remember literally buying that book, like Acting for Dummies.
I have such a book.
I had no idea. I had no friends or family or even extended social circles that were in the industry. So I had no idea. And it was around that time where I was considering this that a friend of mine was helping to cast a trash can commercial of all things, and they were looking for someone, I guess, in my type. And so my friend suggested that I audition, and so I sort of went haphazardly, and lo and behold, I ended up booking this trash can commercial. And it solidified for me in many regards that I really enjoyed the process and the collaborative nature of filmmaking, even in this small way, through this trash can commercial. And then sort of went from there, got a couple more auditions, got my first agent and manager, and sort of led me to where I am today. And again, I think when you look back at a career, it's easy to see the steps, but when you're in it, it feels quite hopeless at times. And many moments where I thought I didn't have what it took, and it was really difficult, and I thought I was going to pivot elsewhere, but something always brought me back, whether it was a play or a stage reading that I got to be a part of, that really reminded me like why we do what we do, and the power of being able to inspire or move someone through a story.
Yeah. I just would maybe toss out this final question, which could be for anyone, which just has to do with AAPI representation on screen. I mean, Sundance has given us wonderful movies to look at, but how do you feel about the future of seeing people like us on screen? Is it, and what can we do to encourage the velocity of this growth?
I mean, I feel very encouraged. Even seeing the films that were represented right before this panel, there is I've said this even with Columbus, but I think it's beyond representation. It's not just about having Asian faces in the camera. It's about a voice and a sensibility. There's something that feels so distinctly Asian about so many of those. And it was beyond just having Asian characters, but I think that's what I'm very excited about. And you see it in literature. We were talking about that beforehand, that there are these really strong voices, and that every subject isn't about Asian identity, but you can still feel a certain quality of Asianness in the voice which is very exciting to me. And again, as just with the coalition of all people of color, I see that, in the Black community and other, Indian community, that these voices in cinema that are having they're a moment. And I just feel like cinema has largely been defined by a kind of singular voice. So it's just exciting. I feel like there's a new era of cinema, and even in American cinema, that is diversified and also more female as well. So to me, it's just beginning. To me, cinema is just beginning because we're finally hearing from a real diversity of voices. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is all the time we have now. I could talk to you all day, all night long, but thank you all for bringing us this film that breaks new barriers still, that offers so many wonderful questions for us to ponder, and some beautiful performances to admire. Thank you, Kogonada. Thank you, Justin Min. Thank you, Malaya, for After.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Janet. Bye.
We are going to transition now to the next film we're featuring, called Micah. Let's look at a short clip from Micah.
Chỉ có cách tôi giải thích cho bạn hiểu. Mẹ kìa.
Thì mình gạt cái này ra. Đúng rồi. Xong rồi con gạt cái này xuống.
Dạ. Mẹ cũng từng rất thích yêu cái bài hát này.
Dậy đi con. Chúc mừng sinh nhật con. Chúc mừng sinh nhật con. Mở ra đi con. Con thích không?
Dạ thích.
Con lấy nhiều lên một chút ha. Con muốn 2 vòng. Đó.
Em bị sao vậy mẹ?
Mẹ không sao. Tao không đi làm ngoại trị nữa đâu.
Mẹ.
Joining us today for the discussion on Micah, writer, director, producer Ham Tran, producer Jenny Trang Le, producer Anderson Le, and producer Bao Nguyen. Ham, how are you? Ham and I had spent some time together in Los Angeles so many years ago when there was a burgeoning Vietnamese American community. We talked about doing some projects, and then you took off. You went back to Vietnam and have since done some incredible things. So you've had this extraordinary career now, where your first film, Journey from the Fall, was at the Sundance Film Festival in 2006. Now you're back with another film. Tell us what you've been doing in these in-between years.
Oh, wow.
A lot.
For a
yes,
while. Yes, I mean, I've been, before going back to Vietnam to direct my second feature, How to Fight in 16 Shields, in 2006, I was fixing a lot of films, for Charlie and for Victor and for a lot of other Vietnamese Americans and Vietnamese filmmakers. And then at one point, the studio in Vietnam says, well, why are we hiring this guy to fix films? We should just hire him to make another, make a film. And so I actually had a chance to work with Bao. He was on 16 Shields as well. And from that, another film was offered that was Hollow. And that was a film that Anderson told me, hey, Vietnam doesn't really have a lot of serious horror films. You should write one. And so he encouraged me to write, and he sort of helped me develop the story for Hollow. And that's the first feature in Vietnam that Jenny helped me produce. And that did really well. And then went on to do Bitcoin Heist and another broad comedy. And then now back to I think this is the, next to Journey from the Fall, this is the closest film that I've ever made. It's such a personal film to me. And so, coming back to Sundance with yet another extraordinarily personal film, it's the best thing that any filmmaker could ever ask for. So I really wanted to thank Sundance, wanted to thank the Utah Film Society, and you, Janet, for inviting me to join this panel. So thank you so much.
Well, I delighted in watching that film so much for so many reasons. It was touching. I laughed, I cried. I was really in awe in a lot of ways about so many of the aspects of the production. I don't imagine anyone gave you $100 million to make this film, but it looks big. I'm not
a little bit less.
A little bit less. Do you want to talk about the budget, just by the way? Because this is a film that has a lot of visual effects done so well. So that part was really impressive. There were so many things that I related to in this film, because I lost my mother recently, just saying. And also because you started talking about the legend of a moon goddess and the moon cakes. And I made the film Over the Moon. So I was just like, whoa, it felt so personal to me, but also because knowing you and so many of the other wonderful Vietnamese American filmmakers, Stefan, R.I.P., and Charlie, and Tony and Tabui, and watching how you've helped grow the Vietnamese film industry has been just in a short period of time was so gratifying. So I'm touching on so many things, but that's what it was like watching this movie. It was like, whoa. I just couldn't even wrap my hands around everything happening at once. So first of all, the idea for this, it came from where exactly and when?
Well, Micah is inspired by a Czech television show that was made in the 1970s, and it found an audience in the late 1980s and early 1990s in Vietnam. And it's just like a huge following, and to the point where people were naming their kids Micah, right? And if you go to, shops in Saigon, you'll see shops that are just randomly named Micah. And the only source for that would be this TV show, and there's even Jenny reminded me that there's even a hairstyle, because, in the original show, she's got this bob cut and they call it the Micah cut, and kids were getting the Micah cut. And so
our EP actually kept saying, oh, we need to have some kind of hairstyle for this hair. And we were like, okay, well, purple hair.
And why do you think that Czech show was so popular in Vietnam? Was there a limited number of content that could get into Vietnam, or what do you think?
No, I think it was popular because there was nothing for kids really at that time on TV that was just different, and that Micah TV show was made even before E.T. Right. And so it just captured the imagination of the Vietnamese audience, the television audience. And so, it was shown, they had only made one season of it, but it was shown every year, every summer. Kids would look forward to it being replayed on television every year. There are different cinema houses that would actually sell out tickets, for people to go and see each episode a day. So, yeah. And so, it's coming out of this following that BHD wanted to develop a film inspired by this. And they had been working on it for 4 years before they brought me on, and through different directors, but it didn't seem to quite have a fit. But then when they sent it to me, I had also just lost my mom at that time, this in 2018. And so when I read the outline, and they had only had an outline at the time, I read the outline, I was like, okay, this sad little boy loses his mother and he's trying to get over his grief and he doesn't know how until he meets this alien. So I was like, I get this kid, I think, yes, this is the perfect project for me. And I took it because I also wanted to make a tribute to my mom. And so basically I wrote, with a lot of personal experiences that's also written interwoven into this film. Yeah.
Well, so you wrote it, you already had some backing, and then you pulled your incredible team together. And what I noticed from back in the day when we hung out in Los Angeles is that you have this incredible community within a community within a community, meaning that, you know, the film community at large, the Asian American community, which is growing and much more coagulated than ever. But then within that, there's this incredible Vietnamese American community that has been so tight, with everyone helping one another in their films. I mean, when you decided to make this movie, how is it that you decided to bring in Jenny and Anderson and Bao and others?
Well, you know, Bao and Jenny and Anderson and I, we have a company called East, along with another filmmaker and a few colleagues, really good friends, you know, that we actually started the company after Stefan passed away, and we wanted to have a company that pay tribute to his spirit of filmmaking. And we wanted to help other Vietnamese storytellers, you know, bring their vision to the screen and to the international stage as well. Because we didn't want films to sort of be made for just local audiences, right? We felt like we were at a point where we need to join the global cinematic world. And so, yeah, and so, you know, we've always collaborated on projects together, Bao and Jenny and Anderson and I. Anderson's always been a part of every single film I've ever made, you know, since Journey from the Fall. And so, and I really have to thank them for carrying me through this, because the budget was really tight, really tight. And there are points where I'm almost at the point of giving up, and they're like, no, you could do this, you know, we've got your back. And so it was just having an amazing support system. And even at the end, you know, Anderson's like, okay, I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this with, you know, we need the opening shot and we need the ending shot, and we don't have the budget to make it. And Anderson's like, let me look for a friend. And so it was an Asian American friend who was a VFX artist. There were two. There was Jenny's friend, our friend, Billy, and then David, who came in and helped us do the opening and ending shot. And, you know, Chris Wong was the composer that I'd started Journey from the Fall with, and also my short film. And he came in to do the score, and he wrote 63 pieces of music for this film, 63. And at the end, we were like, oh, this is great, you know, and it's too bad, like everything is sort of sampled. And he goes, no, let me use some of my contacts. And within a week, we were able to book a 28-piece live orchestra, you know, and that's just the power of like sort of asking for help, you know, and always at my lowest point where I'm going, oh my God, it just feels so alone, that people would just come in and help me through this and lift the film up. And so I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be able to show the film at Sundance.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, a lot of people mistake the reasons that people get into this business or stay in this business. They think we're after fame, fortune, whatever, which is so not guaranteed. But I think it's really the spirit of collaboration, because we really can't do anything on our own. This is what I've thought in the past, but the collaborative spirit that you and your team who became East is particularly admirable, because you really, really have each other's backs. Jenny, I know you were key in all this, and what is it that you were doing before you got sucked into the world of ham?
Actually,
or have you start this?
I went to UCLA, and when I was an undergrad, Ham was in film school, and we were both in a Vietnamese American theater group called Club of Noodles. So we started in theater. Like I had no ideas of doing film at all, and then I was also part of LCC, started by Randall Park, and then. And just, just being in LA and just helping out with films. And all of a sudden I was helping out with Ham's short films, like picking up food and, cleaning out trash. And I wanted to do poetry at first, right? Spoken word. And then I sort of fell into film. And then it was one of those, like, just as you were saying, Janet, just about community and helping each other out. And then I found myself in Vietnam, and I was a first AD for The Rebel, which was Charlie's film that in Vietnam. And then from there, I got offered, a 1-year contract in Vietnam in 2009, and then just ended up staying. So I was in Vietnam. I've been in Vietnam for 13 years. And I have to say that, like, what I really love about the Vietnamese film community specifically is that it's so supportive, and I think that it's also just in the larger Asian and Asian American community. It's sort of like, you know, when one Vietnamese film does well, we all win. So whenever there's a film that comes out, you know, and it's just like, oh my God, I hope it's good. I hope it's good, you know, and there's no sense of like, oh, we're just gonna like not help you because we want our film to be better. It's very much that we help each other to make our films great. And you know, it's just like, and if a film comes out and it's not great, then it's like, oh, it's such a painful experience for all of us, you know. So I think that it was just, for me, starting to do producing, you know, and I've always been very much like, I love the journey and I love the process, you know, and I love making the process as like loving and light and positive and inspiring as possible. And so I've been really fortunate to work with friends such as Ham, you know, Ham's like my bestie. And so it's like, you know, sometimes we'll be on set and things will happen and then just like, we just have that, okay, it's going to be okay, you know, and so I have to say also, you know, just thank you for being amazing, Ham, and just like, you know, really pushing us, you know, sometimes pushing us too much, but that's how a director should be, you know, and just to make the kind of film that we can share with a global audience, you know, and Micah is the first, you know, Vietnamese produced feature film in Sundance, which is crazy. There's been short films, but it's the first feature. So it's just an extra honor. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what was it like for you when you first moved back to Vietnam, and originally you were going to stay just 1 year, but you decided to stay a lot longer?
Well, you know, at the time, Obama had just been elected and I felt like the US was in good hands. So I felt like I could leave and, you know, just have a little adventure. But I think it was, the film industry in Vietnam specifically is so robust and it's growing, and there's still such a huge, you know, theater going audience. And so there is this really high demand and there's just so many projects, and I just kept getting offered more and more projects, you know. And so that was one part, was just that work was there. And then secondly, because I am Vietnamese American, you know, I started working in film in the US, and, you know, it would be fun and it would be like kind of like, okay, this is the story, but I never really quite felt connected. And when I went to Vietnam and would do Vietnamese stories for Vietnamese people in my native language, and not to say that every film I did was like an Oscar film, but even like the really broad comedies were just, there's something I could feel, it just feels like really satisfying. And then also, being part of that community there, you know. And I always joke about how, you know, I'm always going through identity crises, right? So growing up, it was like, oh, what am I? And okay, I'm Vietnamese, and then, you know, doing Asian American studies, you know, and then I'm like, okay, I'm Asian American, but then within the Asian American, there's like the Vietnamese experience, Vietnamese American experience. So it kind of felt like, okay, I know where I am, and then I go back to Vietnam, and suddenly I'm an American. And it's like navigating that space, you know? And so it's just like it's, for me, it's still very thrilling to kind of discover more about myself. And also I think going back to Vietnam, you understand your parents more, right? You understand your family more, and you're kind of like, that's why my aunties are like this. And that's why everybody, you know, people call and then hang up and not say bye. You know, it's like a very Vietnamese thing. And so I think it's just everything, you know. At first, I would have to say that Vietnam is very much developing and so quickly. And so it's very easy to live there, actually, you know, and as a producer, you know, it's all about problem solving, right? So there's something about Vietnam that I feel like I can solve any problem. Like there's kind of like, there's rules and there's kind of ways around the rules, you know. Like in America, it's kind of like, this is the deadline, that's it, done. You know, this is the rule, this is the law, done. You know, in Vietnam, it's kind of like, oh, but you know, you might have an uncle who has a cousin who, and go to dinner with this person and have a phone call, and there's a way, you know. And so I do like that freedom, you know.
I relate to so much of what you say based on my experience with China, getting to know the place where your parents grew up. And also this idea, it's a system perhaps run more by relationships than it is by rules and the written law. And there's a certain amount of flexibility that comes with that, which can be a really nice change after we're used to everything being by, you know, the letter of the law. Anderson, you are very much what are we calling a trans-Pacific person, because you're kind of right in the middle of the Pacific much of the time. but you go back and forth. What has it been like for you to reconnect more with you've been such a great promoter of Asian films and Asian American films through running the Hawaii International Film Festival, but it sounds like you're getting deeper and deeper into production because there is such a growing market in Vietnam. What is that experience like for you?
It's very, definitely a camaraderie. I mean, the fact that Vietnam as a country, we're all children of refugees, right? There's always, the kind of Western view of Vietnam has always been attached to the war. In Vietnam, post-war, once the, it's today it's like 100 million, overall almost 100 million people. It's just, and half of the population is under 35 years old. It's a very young population, and the fact that there's this incredible, again, Gianni talked about hanging out with us in LA with this consortium of Vietnamese American filmmakers is like looking at opportunities of the fact that Orange County, Little Saigon, San Jose, and California, and the proximity to Hollywood, and a lot of these Gen Xers and millennials who went to film school, Vietnamese parents of kids of Vietnamese refugees. They didn't, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't that much of opportunity yet for Vietnamese American filmmakers or creatives in Hollywood. So the fact that a lot of them went back to Vietnam to basically kind of nurture and foster the entertainment industry there was such a unique thing, I mean, maybe similar to maybe like Korea or something like that in the late 80s, early 90s. But and then what Jenny says is like, the rules aren't, there's a lot of opportunities to problem solve and really come up with ways to really build that industry. So and I found that fascinating. And like me, I am Vietnamese American, but I'm from Hawaii, so I see myself as a Hawaii person first, and then as Asian American. But again, when you go back, my first trip to Vietnam was in the early 2000s on a cultural trip as a festival programmer. But I just think again, it's not unique to any Asian American going back to quote unquote the motherland. You get back to your roots, and just it was just like an exciting, especially in Saigon, it's such an exciting city, and then to have this opportunity to really kind of work with, again, my friends to problem solve. And it's like no different from like making an independent film, in the US, just kind of problem solving can come, but there's like, ways to kind of quickly finance films and whatnot, because there's a need for there's a market need to have local films play in the cinemas and whatnot. So yeah, I think it's like in that sense, like Vietnam is a growing economy, and the fact that Southeast Asia as a region is just an exciting kind of powerhouse for not only creative content but just the global economy in general. So yeah, it's just it's a great opportunity as a cultural worker and through cultural production in film festivals. It's just exciting to be a part of that, and I think it's because I think of course, there's always issues when it comes to creating content in Vietnam, but for the most part, it's very open to having an exchange of ideas from different parts of the world to make this happen. So this is what's really exciting.
Well, and add to that, you're bringing a skill set to Vietnam that didn't necessarily exist before, and that you're able to, bring a different perspective and maybe a more global perspective and certain production skills. So it's a perfect win-win for everyone. Yeah. Because you have more.
Yeah, like Anderson was saying, just for context, everything happens so quickly in Vietnam. I've been there for 13 years and I've produced 14 feature films. And Ham, how many films have you done in the 10 years? Yeah, 4. Yeah, so it's super fast.
You're on mute, Ham, but quite a few. And so you're growing the industry. You're bringing so many different kinds of genres. So I'm sure they really appreciate what you're doing, and you get to work. Chances are, if you're kicking around Hollywood, you would not be able to do nearly as much here, and that is a fantastic opportunity. So Bao, you have been you made that wonderful film Be Water recently, documentary about Bruce Lee. So you've been more based here, as I understand, but you've been going back and forth. I read posts. Social media posts of when you were quarantined in Vietnam and you were going back and forth. Quarantine kept following you around. But what's it been like for you to go back and forth?
Well, I was living in Vietnam full time from 2012 to 2018. There was a period in time where I was for 18 months going back and forth to the US every single month. So that was my commute, and it was a bit intense. But lately I'm spending a lot more time in the US. But I think having this group of East Films, of filmmakers we call friends, that are close friends, it makes it easier because we have that sense of community both in America and in Vietnam. And I think that's something that we're really privileged and fortunate to have. You mention it often, Janet, that like the Vietnamese American community is really tight. And we hope to not just make the Vietnamese American film community tight, but we want to make the Vietnamese diasporic film community tight. We want to make the Vietnamese local film community tight, because I think cinema is such a great bridge and universal language, right? As we see with the films that we are watching at Sundance. And there has to be sort of this reconciliation between the generations, especially, after the war. There's so many Vietnamese who spread all over the world, but there's many Vietnamese who, either had to stay or chose to stay. And if we are able to use cinema to, again, make that bridge and make that connection to all these different experiences of being Vietnamese in Australia, being Vietnamese in the US, being Vietnamese in France, I think that common language can transcend a lot of the differences that we have as a community. Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about the film because it was so delightful. There's so much to talk about the diaspora and whatnot, but you found some incredible actors, especially the 3 child actors. What was your casting process like? Because each and every one, the girl had just such a beatific look, as well as the boy, and then the chubby, I know it's not PC to say that, but that's what they call him in the film, so I can say it, the chubby kid, they were all fantastic in every way. Were there a lot of children that you could have chosen from, or did these actors just pop? And are they actors, or are they actual actors?
Actually, it was quite a different mix, because in Vietnam there are a lot of child actors for commercials, and so that's where a lot of the pool of headshots we were getting were coming from. But we were like, I think somebody was saying, "Oh, our hairstylist, he has a son, and he might have a good look, as though oh, please send him in," right? And then there was this other boy that we saw, and he's the cutest thing, and he's like a child prodigy musician, like he plays the piano really well. It's like, bring him in, we want to see him too, And we got really lucky with Fu, who we ended up casting for the lead as Home. Because of a commercial that I was shooting. It was for Glucerna. And then I stumbled on him, and I was given another commercial whose story centered around the little boy and his grandpa. So I was like, oh, great, I'm gonna cast him as the little boy and test him out, since it's sort of like short form, short story, commercials. And so the first day on the commercial set, it was a scene with four kids, and they were supposed to be flying a kite through a park. So, Fu and the other 3 kids were brought in on the grass, and we were like, here, just sit, we'll get the camera ready and everything. And the other kids, like after 5 minutes, they're like, oh my God, it's so hot here. Can we go back? Can we go play? And Fu just turns to them. He's like, quiet, he says, quiet. We're here to work, not to play. Right? First we work, we make money, and then we can play. So I was like, okay, this kid, he's got the right mindset, And so
it's going to be your assistant director.
Exactly. So we brought him in, and I think that the other 2 came in through our a casting director, JV, Micah, who's also been in several of my films, and so he brought us the photo Du Yup-an, who plays Micah, and Tintin, who plays Gubeo. I'll let Jenny tell this story because she loves telling the story.
Yeah, so for Micah, like we said, our casting director, we saw the picture and we said, okay, she's cute. Okay, we couldn't fly up. She lives in Hanoi, which is in northern Vietnam. So we had like a local filmmaker just take a quick casting video for us. And when the video came in, we saw that her eyes were half her face. And we're like, okay, this is the girl, and then she's actually a baby model, right? And so she's never acted before. Oh. And then so the filmmaker, the young filmmaker that was helping us with casting, he was concerned because he was like, I don't know if she can really act. She's a little stiff, But then Ham was like, she's an alien. I think it's okay. It's really, she's got to look, she doesn't have that many lines, she's got to really look the part, like that iconic. I mean, the film is called Micah, right? So it's got to be her, and then we actually put a little bit of a joke in the movie because she's Northern Vietnamese, so she has a Northern accent. And then there's a scene when Home and Micah first meet, and then Home's like, oh, you're from Hanoi? Oh, I thought you were an alien, and it's sort of like a little bit of a joke because their accent's very different.
Oh, that's perfect.
But yeah, and then the third boy, our little showstopper, scene stealer, Gubeo, Tintin. If you go on YouTube and sort of Google like KU, Gu, which is like how you call little boys, and Tintin, Vietnam, you will see many videos and go down a YouTube hole of him performing since he was 4 years old, singing, dancing, like Hát Cải Lương, which is like Vietnamese opera, like rapping. I mean, he's a dynamo. I mean, pretty much the whole film, him had to be sort of like a little less, a little less, because he would just basically talk like this all the time, and he really is the same person, the same character in real life. So he was just a delight. Like as soon as we saw him, we were just, look no further.
They were some of the best child performances I've seen, not to mention that the adults are wonderful. The father was so sympathetic and all the actors were absolutely wonderful. So there's clearly a very large pool of wonderful talent to choose from. And that includes in the visual effects category, which again, since you didn't have the budget of a major Hollywood studio film, clearly a lot of really good talent there though. And were you able, Ham, to achieve everything you wanted with, even though I know you had moments where you wanted to give up and your friends buoyed you up? Are you, the final effect was what you wanted?
I think that at the end of the day, we really made the film to the best of our ability. And so I think we had really extraordinary people coming in to help us. And so, in order to give the VFX, the main VFX team time so they can focus just on the 3D stuff, another company came in to do a second group of shots, like Color Space is one. And they came in and they did all of this simple comp, which there weren't supposed to be that many, but at the end of the day, we had a few hundred more shots than we had planned because, tracking marks were everywhere. And so we had to erase them. Ciclo, this amazing group that came in and did all the drone shots. And what I love about, what Ciclo does is that, he comes in and he makes the drone so much fun, and it's all flipping and it's flopping and it's going around. And so just those talents coming in to lend their voices to make the film better. I'm so grateful that we were able to do it. And, and to do it in this time of COVID, just being able to deliver to Sundance on time. I mean, Bao and Anderson was like, where's our screener? Where's that screener? I'm going, please, I'm trying, I'm doing my best.
I was one of the people chasing you down also.
Because our colorist, our first colorist was overworked. And so she's just, she couldn't work anymore. At one point or another, she just had her body collapsed, and so she was laid in bed like for a few days. So we had to find another colorist. He came in and he was great. He's like, I got this. Boom, he gets COVID.
Oh no.
Right.
Oh, please.
So then, but then the day before he gets COVID, another friend called and said, hey, I have this colorist if you need help. And so it was just like, you know, and I really have to thank my mom. You know, so whenever those things happen, I go, thanks, Mom. You know, it's almost as if she brought these people to help whenever I needed help. And so this is really for her, and thanks to her. Yeah.
Well, we all need help from higher spirits, you know. I do have a question or two that we have time for. Ham, you've done such a wide range of genres, but is there one in particular that you gravitate towards, or do you have something else that you're dying to explore as your next project?
Well, I think in Vietnam, for some reason, I think because of Hollow, I'm known as the horror film guy, you know, and I think it's because I'm so scared of ghosts that I do very well with that genre, is because I know how to tap into my fear and really try to represent that fear. But and so, you know, the next film that we're developing with East is a horror genre. It's a horror thriller. Oops. But I think at the end of the day, all of my films, no matter which genre, the theme of my films is always about family, right? It's always about, you know, fractured families and how we have to remind ourselves that we need to be there for each other, that we need to sort of remind each other that we're loved and that we're there for each other. And so, and you can see that in all of my films.
Yeah, there's such a warmth. There really is such a warmth in the ones that I've seen anyway, and just something that's so relatable. I really hope. What can you say about the future of this film? How can people see it if they're not in Vietnam or haven't bought their tickets on Sundance, because it's probably sold out by now? Do you have plans, or are you in the process of trying to make plans for the film?
Yeah, we're in the process of getting the film sold. We have a few inquiries, and it's very exciting. And so we're hoping that we can have a day and date global theatrical release. But you know, we have a date that's in Vietnam right now, and so that's end of May, beginning of June. And so for those living in Vietnam, for sure, they're going to be able to see the film then. And so hopefully, if you know, if we've got the right deal, then hopefully the rest of the world can see it at the same time as well.
Well, keep up the amazing work that you're doing, not just for Vietnam, but for the world, for all of Asia and the world. And, you know, we're in such a good time for people to see films from many, many different corners of the world. And subtitles are no longer an issue. In fact, I think people really relish seeing things that are authentic, you know, they get glimpses into other cultures. And I really do hope this is a film that, as I told you, did remind me of E.T. and the popularity of film like this, you know, spans many, many ages and nationalities. So I wish you the best. I really do. I hope you and it and all of you see great success.
Thanks so much, Janet.
Thanks
for inviting us to be on this panel.
Thank you for joining. It's been wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, we hope we can bring it to the theaters when things are, you know, less COVID-y and
yes,
it's strange. I mean, we're very honored to be part of Sundance this year, but it's strange to do everything virtually, because then it finishes and then you're like, I think people watched, and I think people liked it.
No,
you know?
it's really too bad. This would be such a wonderful film to see with an audience in a theater. Well, not this year, but soon, I hope. And in Vietnam, you'll be able to have that experience, at least probably in other parts of the world. So good luck with all of it, and bless you all. See you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, now for our third film in this live recording is a movie called Free Chol Su Lee. Let's take a glimpse at the introduction to this film. We are so pleased to have the director and producer of this film, Julie Ha, and the producer, Eugene Yi. This was definitely one of my favorite films for so many reasons, it's a piece of history that somehow has not been maybe entirely lost, but has been very hidden from a lot of people. And I so applaud you in bringing this story to the surface. And I'm particularly impressed because both of you, I believe, are first-time filmmakers. This is your first film?
That's right. And Eugene is director producer also.
Yes, director producer. Forgive me. You're both directed and produced, and you met as journalists, I believe, at Korean Journal many years ago. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
And it's wonderful to follow these threads. Just talking about Korean Journal for starters, that was started by James Rue, who's now known for, having created the Unforgettable Gala. But it's interesting to follow the careers of so many people who've been in the midst and have done their part to enhance our community in many different ways. But you met then. When did you have the idea to make a film about Chol Soo-lee?
Yeah, well, I guess first of all, I'd say I would have thought of making a film if I weren't friends with Eugene, and if we didn't collaborate as journalists first, because I didn't have any filmmaking aspirations to begin with. But both of us have known about the Chol Soo-lee case for quite a long time. I found out about it, and Eugene found out about it through K.W. Lee, the journalist in the film whose series of stories inspired the movement. He's a very influential figure in both our lives. For me personally, I met him when I was 18 years old, and he inspired me to want to become a journalist. But we didn't think about making a film about it until 2014. And I had attended the funeral of Chol Soo-lee at that time. And while I was there, I was just really struck by this feeling of heaviness in the space. The funeral was attended by many of the activists who had come to Chol Soo's aid decades earlier. It was attended by K.W. Lee, and many were expressing such deep regret that they hadn't done enough to save him, even though they had dedicated, 6 years of their lives. It was a 6-year movement to free him, and even many of them tried to help him even after his release when he was struggling. And I was struck by that depth of humanity and compassion that they had. And then KW, meanwhile, he was in so much anguish. He cried out, why is this story still underground after all these years? This was a landmark Asian American movement, that basically asserted that this young, poor Korean immigrant street kid was worth their time, attention, and compassion, and and formed a landmark movement around it. Why is this history not known? And Eugene and I, we were talking. Maybe it was almost a year later, and about making a film together. And I told him about this heaviness, and it just stayed with me. And we just knew that we had to dig in and excavate this story. That we couldn't let it be buried in history. It was too important. We have always been passionate about telling Asian American stories with complexity and nuance. And so we just decided we had to do it. I often tell people it felt like the story needed a release. And that's why we went on this 6-year journey to make this film.
6 years. Wow.
6 years.
And 6 years because you were tracking down a lot of people and finding footage, or what was the process like?
Oh, I mean, when we first started, it really was just the two of us, and though I had a foot in the filmmaking world, I work as a video editor. This was a completely new role for me as well, in some ways. So I really have to thank Julie for trusting me and coming along on this when I asked her to. But when we first started, it was just the two of us, and we were wearing all the hats. We were fundraising, we were producing, we were directing, we were prepping for the interviews and doing the research. I was editing and even filming at the time, and I definitely do not consider myself a cinematographer because I have too much respect for what true DP does. So it's a true independent film, and it just took a process to get to a point where we were able to build up enough funds to be able to really do justice to the story, because it's just such an incredible story and such an important story that we just really felt like we needed to kind of keep growing in that direction and to grow the team to the point where we could really bring people on to really do it justice.
I have such admiration for documentarians. I mean, making any film is difficult, but with documentaries, there's always this kind of open-ended process. You're not quite sure when you're going to get what you need or what the ending might be or whatever. And there's so many things about this documentary that are so surprising. The first, I think, is that this story is not better known. People do tend to know the Vincent Chin story, and a good documentary is made by that. And now we see almost a plethora of Vincent Chin stories being made again. You see how many actually see the light of day, but there's a lot of interest in that. And for many, I think they think that Vincent Chin was the first time there was a lot of community involvement in revealing the injustices surrounding that case. But the Chol Soo Lee case has just as many, if not more. It's a little bit more of a complex story. Why do you think the Chol Soo Lee case didn't get the attention, especially since there was so much community activism around it?
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that actually the Free Chol Soo Lee movement preceded the Vincent Chin campaign. And in fact, many of the activists who were college age during the Free Chol Soo Lee movement, they were so inspired by that case to go to law school and to become lawyers. And so many of them worked on the Vincent Chin case. And the Chol Soo Lee movement actually became like an activist training ground, so it actually also helped create sort of a network of Asian American activists too, to work on the Vincent Chin case. In terms of like why it's not as well known, Chol Soo Lee himself was asked this question when he was still alive, and his answer was he thought it was because his case was messier. With Vincent Chin, very clear, hate crime murder victim, the perpetrators, are very clear. With his case, he was not an angel, as he says in our film. He had brushes with the legal system. He was no model minority. And then even when it ended with a victorious release from prison, he stumbled and struggled in his post-release life. And so perhaps that messy ending, is something we as a community also sometimes are guilty of not wanting to share that history, to talk about that story. Richard Kim, who's a scholar at UC Davis who edited the published memoir of Chol Soo Lee, he told us actually when we were doing our interviews with him that he had never heard of the Chol Soo Lee case in all his years of studying Asian American studies. He only learned about it through meeting KW Lee and some of the activists. And so I think we as a community sometimes need to take a hard look and ask ourselves too, why isn't this taught? And so we hope, that was a main motivation also for Eugene and myself to make this film. We actually hope it will be used, in an educational way, and that this needs to be included in part of our history.
Forgive the intrusion. One of the things that really struck me about the case, and this is perhaps part of the messiness that Chol Soo Lee himself refers to, is that he had a really tough life as a Korean living in Chinatown, and that would hopefully not be the case as much today. But the fact that he came over and he was so isolated is really surprising, that he was an outsider, even though he was among other Asians. And if it weren't for people like Renko, the Japanese American woman who took him in as a friend, and KW Lee, the journalist, God knows where he'd be. And so I love, on the one hand, the stories of the individual friendships and heroism. And I'm so saddened that he felt so isolated as a Korean among Chinese.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that makes it messy, because perhaps we don't want to acknowledge those kinds of divides, and which certainly existed back then, of course, maybe less so, I'd like to think, today.
Right. It also showed just how, different Asians were lumped in, and so I believe, basically Chol-soo, he was sent to an Americanization school, and so it was like, go be with your kind, he was told. And so they sent him to a Chinese school thinking like it's going to be his guy. And it's like, there were no bilingual Korean teachers or counselors to help him. But that was the way society, right, viewed him. Okay, we're going to send you with your kind and you should be fine now. So that's part of, I think, the subtle examination in our film too, that happens under the surface when you look at all whom society neglects.
And if I can just add one thing, I mean, I think it speaks to the diversity of the Asian American community too. I mean, it's a huge community. I mean, I recently saw a map that circled much of Asia and indicated that 2/3 of the world lives here. I mean, there's such a diversity of languages and origin that oftentimes even gets masked by the term Asian American. And that conversation and that sensitivity, I think, is just really important to keep in mind, because that was part of what led Chol-soo to have such a hard time when he first got here, because there wasn't that understanding of that difference.
He got lumped together. He was othered no matter where he was. You know, white community, of course, he was othered. In the Chinese community, he was othered. And so, yeah. And of course, what happens to him after he's finally released from prison and living under those circumstances, it is messy, because he was responsible for the death of someone. He is finally released, and it's not just a smooth path, you know, paved with roses for him to be rehabilitated. And that's something else that we don't acknowledge enough. So how was it for you when you made this film about wanting to show all the different twists and turns of his life? I mean, did you ever worry that the dark turns were not going to be, you were clearly aware that there were peaks and valleys, I assume.
I think what we really knew, though, that we wanted to tell a very truthful and comprehensive story of Chol-soo Lee's life. And I think it also, you know, working on it for so many years, I think what helps is like things start to crystallize about the story, because there were so many ways we could have gone with it. You know, we could just have focused on the movement and the activists and how this changed many of their lives. But I realized, you know, I spoke about that heaviness earlier at the funeral. I realized the heaviness was not just of the activists and KW and their ache for Chol-soo, who died, you know, somewhat tragically, but it was actually maybe, you know, the spirit of Chol-soo Lee, who needed to be at peace. And as burdensome as it was to become the symbol of a movement, he was also very grateful. He had a lot of love for these activists and for KW. And so I thought about how like he might be in pain, knowing that they're carrying this ache, you know? And it was so interesting hearing Ham talk about how personal his film was, because it touched me, because I thought about that. You know, I feel like I wanted to make the film to comfort KW, my mentor, you know? And so I think, you know, once that became more crystallized, it was just about like Chol-soo being able to explain what happened to him and all that he had to overcome, to explain all the people who embraced him. This is my story, you know, even from birth, you know, I had to overcome so much in my life. And so please try to understand, you know, and I think trying to bring Chol-soo's spirit at peace by bringing some peace to all the people who embraced Chol-soo.
Very well said. Very well said. Because when you commit to a movement and you put a lot of effort into activism and certain causes, you know, you want it to have a happy ending. You want to know that your efforts were justified, you know, but it really ties up neatly in a bow.
That's why the final lines, I don't know if I should reveal them, but the final lines that Chol-soo delivers are so important to us, because that was the message we feel like he wanted to give to everyone.
Well, it's, you know, the movie is so important for just those of us who feel like we've been part of an ongoing movement that started, you know, this is now 50 years ago. And I do feel like in the late 60s, especially around Berkeley and the Bay Area in general. That was in 1968, in fact, was when the term Asian America or Asian American was born, apparently, by a professor there. And it does seem like that was a period where a movement, or at least an identity, was born. And then this case, of course, from the early 70s seems like just a great example of how the community galvanized. But again, the fact that it was not extremely well known because of the complexities, perhaps, of the story is interesting. But it's a great time for people to know about it now, and for us to really reflect on the growth of this movement. What are your hopes for the film in the future? Do you have distribution plans, or are you hoping to get distribution? What is going on with that now?
Yeah, at this point, we are doing our festival run, and we are an ITVS film, which means we're part of the public television system. So we're going to be on public television at some point, probably next year, but we don't have a date on that yet. It's sort of we're figuring that out as we go. So at this point, we're still looking for theatrical distribution too, because we'd love to be able to share the film as much as possible.
Yeah. We'll be on Independent Lens actually next year at one of their stories for justice. And then
as well as plans to distribute in Korea as well. And our Korean producer Sona Jo is sort of handling those details as well. So we're just we're at that early point right now. We're hoping to really get the film out as broadly as possible.
I feel like there'll be a very warm reception for this film if people get to see it, and I definitely hope they will, because
we hope so.
Again, it's so important. And again, is the 50th anniversary this year? I know it's the 40th for Vincent. There's so many things seem to happen in a decade markers. But
right. Okay.
Well, it would be next year, right?
Next year.
I think, of his release. He was originally arrested in 73, but released in 83.
Yeah. So there's such strong interest. I know that a lot of curricula across the country, whether it be in middle school, high school, colleges, they're really looking more closely at Asian American history. Hopefully this film comes highly recommended or even required. And it's very, very important. It's a good companion with Vincent Chin to show the differences of the two cases also. Yeah. So I wish you the best of luck with that. What, do you have other things planned for the future, and now that you've gotten sucked into the world of filmmaking?
Actually, I hope you don't mind, Janet. I would like to take a moment just to thank our team, just because, as you said, we're first-time filmmakers. We worked our hearts out. We didn't give up. So, but we could not have made this film and be presenting at Sundance without our incredible team. And many of them, Jean Shen, Sue Kim, Sona Jo, Eugene mentioned, is our producer in South Korea. Aldo Velasco was our editor and edited with, and Jean Shen also edited, co-editor Anita Yu. And I just want to mention them because, that this is the reason why we were able to make this film that we had. That I've actually told people, like, I'm very at peace with the finished film, which I never thought I would be, because it was a very complicated story to try to do justice to. And so I want to thank them all. Eugene and I both want to thank them, because we could not have done it without them. And we often tell people it took 6 years to make this film. It took 6 years to free Chol Soo-lee. One of the activists in the movement always said, it's not a solo, it's a chorus. And, we believe this was a chorus, and that's why we're able to be premiering here at Sundance.
No, it's so wonderful. I'm sorry you were deprived of the experience of sharing it with people in a movie theater. But hopefully that will come about. And I think that, what I mentioned earlier when the subject came up is it's the collaborative spirit that we mostly love when we're making things.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I also want to highlight, our archival producer, Brian Becker, but also the young man who sort of voiced Chol Soo for the film, whose name is Sebastian Yoon. And actually, there's a couple of stories that we like to tell regarding how we met him, but he just became such an important collaborator for us. Actually, our producer Sue Kim encountered him at a panel for another documentary called College Behind Bars, which is about the Barred Prison Initiative, through which incarcerated people can earn college credits while they're still imprisoned. And to her surprise, it was a young Korean American man who was part of that panel. And he's actually one of the participants in that series. And, what impressed Sue when she saw him was just the conviction and the passion and the intensity that he spoke about his experience with. And so she had a sense that he might be a good match for our project in one way or another. And so when it came time for us to find someone to voice Chol Soo-lee, because we had his written memoirs, so we know what he was going through internally, but we needed to give voice to that so people could feel that. And she connected us to him, and from there, just this incredible collaboration emerged. I mean, he helped us not just by voicing Chol Soo, but by shaping the script as well, and really helping us emphasize what we've been talking about a little bit this whole time, the loneliness that Chol Soo felt his whole life, but which took on special power and and had this incredible impact on him when he was in prison. Just the way that someone who is imprisoned experiences that loneliness. And to be able to give our depiction of Chol Soo that kind of heart was something that we were struggling with, frankly. But through this collaboration, it was just really, it's still one of my favorite things about the process of having made the film. And we just consider ourselves so lucky to have been able to meet him.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Sebastian. Yeah, he just, he made everything, we've told him before, it's like once you joined, everything fell into place. Yeah, everything fell into place. And he said he could identify so much with Chol Soo-lee. He read his memoir, he looked at some of the interviews. And so he was released from prison in 2019. And he said, obviously he had his own trauma from his own incarceration experience. And yet he was willing to revisit, those experiences in order to give voice to Chol Soo-lee, in order to help people understand him. And that was very important to Sebastian. He was so passionate about it. He's like, I want people to open their hearts and minds, to Chol Soo-lee about how hard it was, to reenter society and people wanting you to be a certain way. And it's very difficult. And so the fact that he personalized this so much, and then was willing to put himself through that, was just really touching. And we're so grateful to him.
Yeah. There's just a generosity in terms of what he shared with us that still just boggles my mind.
Well, I think we're in an age where we're trying to bring more compassion to many underrepresented voices and individuals, right? And I've seen some very, very touching films about prisoners and prison reform. One of them is called The Exonerated. And what strikes me, which is the same thing that Chol Soo-lee had, which is it's almost like if you've survived that system, you've transcended it to the point where you're like a bodhisattva. You have to become so spiritually evolved just to survive. And when I saw this film and heard a number of the people who were exonerated from DNA testing, they were somehow lacking in bitterness. They've been wrongly accused and imprisoned for many, many, many years, and being released into society with less than what someone else who had been convicted with, no tools, no transition, and yet they have a sense of this kind of transcendence. And I find that to be, really touching. And I think Chol Soo-lee had that. He had to have had it. How else?
I know. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing to have received, to have sort of felt from that film. But that's also such a high bar to put on people, to force them to achieve sainthood, to be able to survive. And I think Chol Soo's actually, his struggles reflect the fact that it wasn't easy. And there was no conversation about reentry back then. And one of the statistics that Sebastian sort of shared with us was that over 50% of people who are released from prison go back. Recidivism remains a huge problem. Yeah. And it's something that was not talked about much in Chol Soo's time, and Chol Soo clearly struggled with it. And I think this is where it kind of comes back to that compassion that you were talking about, I think, in terms of making sure that when someone is struggling like that, when someone is going through something like that, there's an understanding of their fuller humanity. And we hope that our film can be sort of part of that, because I think that's really what, by telling the full story of Chol Soo-lee and letting him talk about what he went through, you get a sort of glimpse into another person's soul, we hope. Yeah. And to sort of try and take that and help us sort of grow into something that where we might be able to have more of that in our own lives.
Yeah. Well, and that's exactly what I meant, is that they manage to survive, and they have to do so without being constantly angry and really self-destructing, because many people would not survive. But then the other part of that is how do you survive in the quote unquote real world,
right?
Having gone through all that, there's always going to be scars, and if you don't have a system that can help you, or the right kind of support, I mean, there's just that's a whole other thing. So there needs to be compassion about that part of their lives. So it's just Absolutely. It's really a very complex. We're not well equipped. Really, we're not well equipped at all to handle this. Yeah,
I was just going to add. I do think the bitterness ate away at him. Actually, the fact that the DA and the police department, they did never admit in his lifetime that they did anything wrong. And I think that did eat away at him, and maybe it did contribute to his self-destructive behavior. And I'll share a story with you. We did not put him on camera, but I did reach out to the police detective who's in the film, Detective Falzone. I just cold called him one day, and I asked him about the case, and he's given me permission to say this publicly. He remembered the case right away, and he just said to me, in my 22 years of working homicide, the Chol Soo-lee case is the one case where when I meet my maker, I want to know the truth, that he had reservations about whether or not Chol Soo-lee was the real killer.
Interesting.
And I told him, I said, Chol Soo-lee was very upset about that, that was never admitted. And I said, this film wants to give him some peace. Mm-hmm. Can I share this if ever asked about it? Mm-hmm. And he said yes.
Wow. Yeah, this is, there's so much, and the layers upon layers, and with each new experience, it adds another layer, the victory, the simplistic version is like, he's really wonderful, but with each passing experience, you think it just adds more depth to who he is. And it is very complex. And then, to have someone who was very good looking, if it's okay to say, and then have him become disfigured through the fire. I mean, all of it it's almost on kind of a mythological level, because you can't, but it's also so human, Yeah. There are a couple of questions that are actually related, which have to do with the actual, he was so articulate about his experience. That was also so interesting. Did you always plan to use his own words as part of the film? And with Sebastian, how did you choose which lines he was going to narrate?
You want to start?
Yeah. We'd always planned to use his own words for the film, and that was actually part of the struggle that in terms of how the film came together, because we were able to uncover like a surprising amount of archival of Chol Soo-lee, and I think all credit goes to the reporters, the journalists, and the activists, everybody who was either working on the case or talking about the case at the time. And thanks to that, we had that wealth of resources. We also had his written memoirs, which I mentioned before, but finding that balance was really the tough part, to make it feel coherent and to make it feel like you knew him. And so we did what we could to craft a script based off of everything we had. And once actually one thing that actually freed us a little bit, once the pandemic hit, we really sort of leaned into our identity as an archival film and that kind of historical film. And that allowed us to really sort of take the memoir and just write the script for him. That was what we started with when we started working with Sebastian. And then with Sebastian, we continued to collaborate and develop the points that seemed like they would be the most representative of what Chelsea's experience was.
Mm-hmm. I imagine there was a lot that you couldn't use. It sounded like he's a very prolific writer. So you had a lot to do. Yeah.
There was actually at one of the events, I mean, Richard Kim, the professor that Julie mentioned, sort of said he had 600 pages of handwritten memoir that he was sort of going through. And, he wasn't formally educated in a way because he spent so much of his youth in the juvenile justice system. So it was really a Herculean effort to sort of mold that text, but he was prolific. And K.W. Lee, actually, this reflects their relationship. He continued to encourage him to write his story, to tell his story, because it was so important to be able to, again, tell the totality of the story and just represent his experience and his humanity to the fullest.
Mm-hmm. And he was writing in a second language on top of that. You talk about how he was learning English while all this was happening, which is
KW likes to say that in the end, like Chelsea Lee was a poet. When you look at what he left behind.
No, he was, and
if I may add, I mean, he actually wrote poems from prison, and this is a little maybe. I mean, this is one of the things that's left on the edit room floor, but we actually struggled with that because the poems are actually, again, he wasn't formally trained, but there are lines that are quite beautiful and quite striking, especially sort of coming from someone who had the experiences he had. But ultimately sort of in the totality of what we had to work with, it felt like his own prose words were just so powerful on their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for giving us this incredible movie that should be seen by everyone, particularly those who are interested in Asian American history, but just anyone who is interested in just a very human story and looking at the criminal justice system. There's so much packed in there, and I'm so glad you unearthed a lot of this material for us. When is the book coming out?
The book was published already.
It was already published. Yeah.
I
thought you said he was editing it.
Freedom without justice.
Okay.
Order it now. our free plug for Richard Kim.
Yeah.
Wonderful. It does take a village. I can see how many people came together. And again, those scenes with Renko and KW are so touching, and I think inspiring for people about how one person can really make a difference, a big difference in someone's life and in many people's lives. And I hope that's one of the main things that people take away from this film. I know I did. There's always more we can do.
That's right.
That's right.
And I appreciate that this case from so long ago is now a reminder of what our community has been through and how far it's come, and how the roots of it date further back than many of us knew about. So
absolutely. KW Lee has often said, people without a history are hollow. Mm-hmm. And so we're hoping once people learn this kind of history, and not just Asian Americans, but all Americans, really, this was an important social justice movement for American history as well, that people could see, what, the story doesn't have to end sadly. Maybe we get to figure out how the story ends. What will the legacy of Chelsea Lee and this remarkable movement be, and how will we allow the story to move us, to change us, maybe to inspire us to work toward a more just society. So we do hope that people will take something positive from it.
And know how strong our community is. How when we're motivated, we can really rally. And
that's right.
That's incredible. That clip that you had from the movie where James Woods plays Tony Serra was great. quite interesting. I've
Oh
worked
my
with Vincent
gosh.
actually, and yeah, that we have to write our own history basically. The way that it be written by other people would not talk about the incredible, strength and commitment of the community. And that was said when I saw that footage of how many people gathered around. And I know for myself, when I moved from New York to the Bay Area, I was immediately and remarkably impressed with how strong the community was, and it continues to be.
Right.
So thank you again for sharing that piece of our history. And thank you for joining us today. And I'm so glad your film was accepted at Sundance. And what a wonderful addition to this year, especially as many Asian Americans are thinking about identity and what we can do together as a group. So everyone, please go see Free Chol Soo Lee. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Eugene, for your remarkable work.
Thank you so much.
That concludes this live portion of Asia Society and the Sundance Film Festival 2022. We've seen so many incredible films and heard from so many incredible people from many locations around the globe. And it's just been a very rich offering for the audience. And I feel so privileged to have been in conversation with the amazing talent that we were able to present to you today. Thank you for joining, and hope to see you next year at Asia Society and the 2023 Sundance Film Festival. I am so pleased to introduce to you a film that's in the U.S. Dramatic Competition at Sundance this year. It's called Blood. It's made by a married couple that have worked together for many, many years and made many films together. And let's start by showing a clip from the film Blood.
Toshi-san, hi. Can I ask you a favor? Can you come and translate for me?
Hi. Ah. Wasabi.
Mm-hmm.
Careful.
Mm-hmm. Ah, strong. Great.
Oh. すごい。
これご飯で食べる。
吸った途端全然違いますね。ああ、Are you crying? 感動して泣いてます。
泣く。わお。
いただきます。
はいどうぞ。はい、ここにあるよ。
I can feel it in my eyes.
はい、始めましょう。はい、笑顔で。
おいしいです。You should say.
最初。
美味しいけど、すごい。
涙が出るでしょ。
鼻詰まりが治ります。
そう。
これは。
風邪、花粉症、OK。なんか死にそうな顔しないで。
なんか今魂が抜けるような。
知らないや。
いや、マイスピリット。
なんか。何の言って。で、あと海苔をね、もう少し。
That scene is that it's not just the white foreigner that is reacting strongly to the very hot wasabi, but the Japanese person too. So anyway, I'm so pleased to introduce to you the director and producer of the film, Brad Gray, and the producer of the film, So Young Kim.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
Hi, nice to see
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Nice to see you. What I've learned in the last couple of days is that you two are not only bridges between East and West, but you've really traveled the world over. Just tell us a little bit about your sensibility and how it affects your filmmaking, where you've been and how it all sort of converged onto this and many other films?
Wow.
So it's a big question.
Yeah.
It must have been something that drew you together. I know you met in Chicago, but
we met in Chicago. We were at art school. Actually, I had graduated. She was still a student.
Yeah, I was finishing up my undergrad in painting, and then I think you did a performance, like sculpture project in the courtyard.
Yeah, you didn't like that.
I didn't
but
like
then
that.
we did. You did a lot of performance. We were both invited to a group of artists that were doing a sort of installation performance for a week in an abandoned building in Chicago, and so the project was called Walk, and we were both a part of that. So we met doing that, and then I was interested in film, and so had taken a film. The film courses in Chicago are very experimental. Like if you have sync sound, it's like you sold out or something. It's very experimental. And
not exactly USC.
Not at all. Not at all.
Scratch films. Yeah.
So we met. We had met doing artwork and sort of installations and different things like that. And then I studied film in London, and so did an exchange program in London, doing sculpture at the Slade.
Mm-hmm.
And then when did we start? Yeah, and then I went to film school, and then after that, and so made sort of experimental films. In the meantime, more. She was living in New York, and I lived in LA. Well, I went to USC, and then we decided to do this first film together, my film in Iceland. But the year before we left for Iceland, So got a job in Tokyo. So we lived in Tokyo for a year, and then we went to Iceland and shot our first film. And then she's like, well, if you can make a film, I can make a film. So then she made 2 in a row, and then I've been trying to catch up with her since then.
Like that good old competitive spirit. And
I'm like, oh, it looked so easy, He made it look so easy, actually. I think it's all his fault.
I see. It's all your fault. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's true.
She's never going to forgive you for that.
Yeah, exactly. She's thinking off. I don't think we started with thinking that we were going to just make films though for a long time. But once you start making them, it's such a long process. And it gives such a structure, because when you're doing like just artwork openly, you can do anything. And so a film has so many sort of restraints that I think ended up working in our favor as something that would be a goal and that takes a long time to sort of achieve. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And there's an emotional connection with film that you don't really get all the time with artwork.
Yeah, especially if you're doing like just sculpture or paintings or something. It's very different than.
And it's collaborative.
Yeah. And filmmaking is much more collaborative.
Yeah, in a good way.
In a good way.
Anyway, sorry, that was a long answer.
Oh, that was a really good answer, because I can see how you just sort of tumbled forth, and hope, it seems like you could understand enough of each other's sensibilities that you could be supportive, maybe offer up a different opinion at times. So this particular film, Blood, was a co-production between Iceland and Japan. There aren't many of those. Tell me about how that came to be.
Well, we had lived in Japan. Well, we lived in both places. And so I wanted to make a film in Tokyo. And there's a choreographer there who we became friends with when we lived there. And her and I had always talked about working on something together. We were like, just had a box, like a hypothetical box, just put our ideas in a box, and someday we'll open a box and sort of compare notes. So when I started working on this, I thought, I could do this in Japan with Chiyoko. And then, I got in touch with her, and she was on board with that idea. And that's how this sort of Japanese component of the film took hold. And then in the film, you see dreams of this character's husband. And Iceland became a really viable option, because at that time, we shot the Japanese part in 2019 in the fall, like right before the pandemic hit. And then in the Icelandic portion was last spring. So Iceland was one of the few places we could shoot without wearing masks, because it was so safe there. It's so secluded, and they test, and they're really, really cautious. And we have so many friends there that was I wanted to find a place where it just felt like they naturally had friends. And it's easier to do that if you already know the people you'll be shooting with. Mm-hmm. So that's why that came to be.
And what was your role primarily, So Young, on this? Do you get very involved during the script stage, pre-production, post-production?
Yeah, normally I would like to get involved during production as well, but for Blood, I think it was more in the development and story development in the beginning, just be a sounding board. And then during the edit, I wasn't able to do the physical editing, but he would show me cuts and would do notes and go back and forth and stuff. So yeah.
She's always around, so there's always.
I'm always around. That's
like, stop talking about.
Just stop talking.
Yeah, it's like, when is she not working on?
I know.
Yeah. There's another producer who was on this one though, David Arusha, who's like, I was on the phone every day with him for like probably the last 6 years, and so he was this sort of really like holding my hand producer, because so was shooting TV a lot during the time we were doing this one, which was good.
So you just make it up as you go along in terms of what's needed and who else is involved, and it sounds, and you provide the support that you need. And this movie was just literally transporting one to Japan, and it felt really intimate. It's very easy to kind of exoticize a location, I think, especially when you're talking about one that is very different culturally. And I felt like this one was so intimate that you had a lot of close-ups and a lot of really nuanced conversations. You really take your time. You saw that in the clip. And this, I think, is part of your style. But what were some of the challenges maybe about shooting, this film in Japan? Was the environment very hospitable for you?
Oh, it was wonderful. I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, because we were trying not to exoticize, Japan. We didn't want a scene where she goes to a temple or has a, tea ceremony or something. And a lot of that episode, give thanks to our friend Tak, who he's just a really good friend of ours, and he would tell me, like, don't do that or don't do this. and he introduced me actually to Ueno, who's the actor. He sent me a YouTube video of him. Ueno's a musician. And then when I met Ueno, he introduced me to all his friends. And because the film's about her visiting him and she will meet his friends, we're like, can we use your friends in the movie? And then he introduced us to a guy that owned about like 10 restaurants in Koenji. And they were like, you should shoot in Koenji. So we were really well, sort of guided about the process. So's old boss introduced me to Sami-san, the guy who does the wasabi rice, because I said I wanted to meet interesting people, and he's like, oh, I know somebody you should meet. So it was like a really warm and wonderful way of shooting, because it's like you go somewhere, you have an excuse to meet friends of friends, and then that just like one led to the other, and kind of followed. So we kind of put Chloe in that situation too, and then she just kind of follows whatever he's doing, and that was a really warm and wonderful way. Yeah, it was really nice, easy.
So perhaps you were writing the script as you were shooting, because it sounds like you didn't necessarily have all actors, you didn't necessarily have all the locations locked in. You were creating the environments through friends and through a community. It feels that way. It feels like it was made amongst friends.
For sure. Yeah. It was a combination. Like Ueno, when I said, here, okay, we're going to shoot these 4 weeks. He's like, okay. And he gets out his calendar. He knew that we were going to shoot these 4 weeks, but he's like, okay, I'm recording a concert this weekend. And then here I've got band practice, and here I'm doing, and we're like, you can't, like, I need you to be acting in the movie, like I can't, there's like a lot of people we're paying, and we can't just like stop, and then, you stop and sit back and think about it. And I was like, well, can we record those things? Can we make that part of the movie? And he's like, yeah, sure. Let me ask and make sure it's okay with everybody else. So a lot of the events in the film happened because Ueno was doing something, and then we would just kind of go with him. He recorded an album in the countryside with his friends, and it's just a wonderful location. And it says something about their relationship, because if you invite a friend who's a girl with you to go somewhere for the weekend, and it's just to hang out, and then, but it's still intimate, but it's like, it's not too intimate, but it says something about the way they trust each other, that they can sort of spend time together. And so it was actually better scene than what I would have thought of.
But what's really amazing about Brad and the way he works is that, like, I'm so envious when I watch him work. And I had 1 week where I went to Tokyo to be there for the shoot. And it's so wonderful because he allows that space and time to really like switch out of the plan if something's not working with Ueno-san or Carla. He's like so flexible. And I think that's like him doing his creative best at that moment, and it's just really great to watch. I love watching him work because it's so fantastic, because you have to keep your mind agile and flexible and be really in that moment to be able to always go with the flow of it all, especially under that amount of pressure and stress. So I think it's just wonderful process that he creates for himself.
Absolutely. Well, you have a very supportive producer and wife. That's beautiful.
No, he has many, but also he has
many.
he has many supportive producers. One element, there are 2-3 other producers that are, very good as well. So.
But no, it's nice to have producers. Sometimes producers don't get any credit, but the allowing, because that's not often how people approach their work, just allowing it to unfold. And you feel the very naturalistic style of the film. Exactly. It never felt disturbed or forced or,
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's definitely the team. I mean, everybody knew this is the type of film we wanted to make, and they were really supportive. If it was like, hey, let's stop and walk down the street and shoot, because the light is nice, and everyone's like, okay, and how can we help? And it just, you just get everybody in sync, and it just became a really wonderful experience. Yeah.
Did you know the actress beforehand, Carla Drury?
Carla, no. Well, she was recommended by Ginny Ju, casting director that we were using at the time here in LA, and she was in town, and we met, and she was like, I don't really like your script. But she's like, my manager did. And then we went for a walk, and we talked about, where the story came from for me. And then she's like, okay, I get it. And then she was on board, and she was probably on for about 2 years before we filmed. And the idea of working, because we were at first talking to Japanese actors. There's so many wonderful Japanese actors. So that was, there was a casting director, Kei Kimura, who had helped us find actors in Japan. And then this idea came up of working with a non-actor, which is something that I really like to do. And I talked to Carla about it, and we met Ueno, and it was just like, oh, this is just a gift. So, yeah.
Talk a little bit about the daughter character.
Oh, she's great. So Futaba, there's a scene in the film where Chiyoko, the choreographer, works with a group of Down syndrome children. And Chiyoko's she's just like a son, and like seeing her interact with other people is just so exciting. So I wanted to do this scene. I had seen her work with elementary school children. And so we came up with another idea of like, she was working with Down syndrome children and teenagers in a park. And so I contacted the society in Tokyo, and the guy that was helping navigate that had a daughter that was about the right age for the character that I wanted in the film. And we couldn't find anybody. And I was like, can I meet your daughter? And he was like, yeah. And then she was just like super cool from the, she's like, what's up? And then she walks off. And then she was just herself constantly. And it's like what you want I wanted to not know what was going to happen if she was in a scene. And she definitely was going to be able to provide that. And she met Ueno, and they just super bonded immediately. And it was just such a gift. I called her like the little butterfly, because she's just, she does whatever she wants, and she just brought so much life to the film. Yeah.
Well, I know people who have children with Down syndrome, and they say they're just the most loving, unfiltered beings. They're so loving, so incredibly loving. And
yeah, she's so giving. Yeah.
So Young, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you have coming up? That Brad is going to support you to the end of time?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
She's got a list.
I know. I have a list. But I think, because I've been working so much in TV, right now my time is so constrained. So there's a script that I've been developing for a long time and writing. And then I'm going through this rewrite phase, and I'm kind of drawing Brad in to help me rewrite the script with me and for me. So he has to work for me, which works much better. So he's a great writer as well.
And so that's frequently how you work, that Brad might write something, you have the idea, you might do a draft, and then he might come in and
Yeah, I think like that really worked well for Love Song, which was my last film, and I was teaching at that time, so I was lacking some time because for me especially, like writing is such an arduous and long process. So if I could bring in somebody to help me kind of shorten that timeline, it's really helpful. And that's how it worked for Love Song. And I think for us, like writing together works, and then editing together works, like creatively. I mean, I don't think we could ever co-direct something together because that's
we couldn't co-direct, but on set we're really supportive. Like she's really supportive.
Yeah. On set we are.
Kicks me off her set, but
he's there talking a lot. So I had to kick him off, and then when we write something together, and then when we're editing together, we work really well together. So
well, writing is very, very lonely when you do it on your own, and so is editing. You're stuck in a room, right?
Yeah. So a lot of those stories are really personal, and they're about like her family or our family, and so it's easy to step into her world because I know the characters immediately because I know who she's writing about. You know, she's writing about people like us, or
people you've known,
people I've known, or stories I've heard, and everything like this. So
that was perhaps not always the case. So Young, what is your background? Where were you born and raised? And then
I was born in Korea, and then our family immigrated when I was 11. And then, but I think it worked out really well, like for Love Song, because like he knew, like as I was developing and writing that script, like the backstory, and then I would bounce ideas off of him. So he knew where the characters were, that I needed him to like take a chunk and expand on it. And same thing with this new script called Stray Dogs. Like he knows like the genesis of it and what the evolution of that story is, so he could kind of pop in and expand certain parts, and also, do his pass on it, and I could get it back and edit it down. So that seemed to work really well. I think that is kind of similar in process for us in editing as well. So I feel like we're very clear about what our strengths and weaknesses are in editing. So I'm able to do a certain aspect of the storyline and then give it back to him, and he could go in there and he does his pass. I think that's why it works really well.
That's a wonderful collaboration. Is there anything else? Yeah. Oh, it's I love, over time couples get to know each other better and better. And I've seen other couples who work very, very closely together, and sometimes it doesn't always work out that well. There does have to be a clear division of labor. Sounds like the two of you have had a lot of experience and figured out how best to make it work. I think it's very enviable for a lot of people, because to have a partner at all times, that you can lean on.
I don't know. And I think we have friends who direct together, like Ryan and Anna, like certain directing partners. And I don't know how they do it. Or the Daniels. I don't know how they do it, because we tried on Chinatown Project which Karen Chin was. No, but it was a test. However, what happened for us when we tried to co-direct was like, I would be like, no, you decide if we're gonna shoot on that street, and then you'd be like, oh no, you could decide if you like that door. Like we would just kind of pass the buck back and forth to each other. So what we ended up was something that like neither one of us were like deciding. Remember, it was kind of, well, was that like coming from like your perspective of the story? It was at mine. Remember, it was such an awkward process.
Who's on first? Yeah, you're both being deferential to the other person.
Yeah,
so it's much easier to like work for each other.
Yeah.
So she's doing something. How can I help? What can I do? You just offer stuff in the same way with this film or anything that I've done. She'll read it and make suggestions, and I want to hear what she says. Or when I'm on set, she's next to me. If I have a question about anything, I can always ask her. But I'm directing my films and she's directing her films.
Right. No, that makes total sense with the inevitable crunch of time and money. a little hierarchy is helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's like, if you're going to sink the boat, you want to, take it yourself.
Someone's going to take it.
It's like the other person can grab the life jackets.
Yeah, life jackets.
Just like you just drive right into that wall. Yeah.
And so where are you both residing now? Since you've traveled, I mean, I've heard about, you already lived in Japan and Iceland and got married in Fort Wayne, Indiana, which I heard about. Do you have, not during the pandemic, of course, but do you have some, itches to go elsewhere and live elsewhere? Or are you pretty settled now?
We live in Los Angeles now, mainly because we have children, and we really like the school district here, and her sister's here. So we'll probably be here until they graduate, and then
high school.
Yeah. And then we've always talked about retiring in Iceland because we lived there for 3 years, and we have a lot of friends there. Like you see them in the movie, and it's a really wonderful environment. And so, but we might go there sooner. Have a place that would be I think that's the only place in our mind that we both agree on,
right now. Yeah I think for us it's like the most creative way to live for us or something right now, but our daughters think that's crazy idea, so I don't know. It's negotiable.
How old are your daughters?
They'll be 11 and 15 next week. They both have birthdays next week.
So they definitely have strong opinions. I think we talked a little bit about Iceland. I'm also fascinated by this, I had hosted a world-class pianist, Vikingur Olafsson, but it was, and my experience in Scandinavian countries in general is that they have incredible curiosity about the rest of the world because they're very clear they're not at the center of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to go out and learn. And he said things like, we would never pass a body lying on the street. Like that just would never happen in Iceland. And I was like, and he said they have many different parties, but their most right-wing party is very left of our left.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, they're like, it's a very socialist, society. All the Nordic countries are, and there's just everybody's written a book in Iceland. At Christmas time, it's like it's a thing that people give away books, and so it's like if you're buying groceries at the grocery store, the person stocking the shelves has probably written a book, and they're very creative and they're very well read, and like you said, they don't view themselves as the center of the world, but they feel it's responsible to know everything else they can about any culture. So if there's if there was an event in Iceland from another country, it would be just really well attended. People would they're just very intelligent, more than your general sort of like maybe some of the other places we've been to, and curious, so.
Yeah.
But somehow I find that it's just a really interesting contrast. On the one hand, Japanese society, getting back to your film, is also very specific, fascinating, very rich. People seem very thoughtful, but different, more, a little bit more isolated, perhaps. I mean, there's a lot of really deep-seated tradition, and there's so many generalizations that can be made that may sound inauthentic, but I love the contrast of thinking about these two countries, and, you're having hop back and forth between the two to make this really lovely, intimate movie. And I guess my final question is, I know that you said just yesterday that one of your main influences is Ho Xiaoxian, the Taiwanese filmmaker. Are there others that you might cite?
Oh, I could just talk about Ho Xiaoxian forever. He's like, he's like 90% of the influence on this movie. I mean, the movie that he made that was such a big influence on me is Café Lumière, which is his homage to Ozu. So Ozu's somebody that I just feel is beyond our reach, but we try to go somewhere in that direction, but wouldn't say that we're quite there yet in terms of grasping his way of talking about humanity. But Wong Kar-wai has always been a really, really big influence on both of us. It's almost like more at the beginning of our films were super Wong Kar-wai influenced, and then now for me it's like, oh, let me try to see what Ho Xiaoxian is doing and trying to learn from that. Tsai Ming-liang is a really big influence. Edward Yang, the actor Issei Ogata, who's in my film, the character, I mean, I wanted him, but the character that I was most influenced by was his character in Yi Yi. He was the Japanese businessman in that film, and he's just he's just warm. It's just like what's your character. I was like, your character is like a sweater. It's like something you put on when you're like, you need that comfort, And so Edward, there's so many Asian films that I think are big influences for us. But a lot of Taiwanese filmmakers, and we like Wong Kar-wai a lot. Now I'm going to leave some. Oh, Imamura is probably one of my favorite Japanese filmmakers, but his style is not necessarily the style of this particular movie, because I think Imamura said he makes films about the lower half of human society and the lower half of the human body. So it's like, but it's like such an inspiration because he's such a creative filmmaker and so prolific.
I think one of the things that many of us are relishing is how international films are getting seen more than ever. The streamers do create the opportunities that didn't used to exist as much. I used to go to the film forum all the time when I was living in New York, and that's where I got educated. But more and more these art houses, and especially now, they're really imperiled. but it's wonderful to see films shot in many different locations in many different languages, and nobody seems to give a damn anymore. That you have to read subtitles, and that just happened seemingly overnight. So, and your film hopefully will be a beneficiary of that obstacle having been removed after Bong Joon-ho made that famous comment, about the ancient captions. So again, thank you so much. It feels like also very warm, inviting, emotional, but not overly so, just really just a beautiful journey through Japan through the eyes of someone who is trying to heal. And I hope everyone sees it. And do you have plans for distribution? Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, we'll find out today. I mean, we'll find out this week. It premieres today, so it's the first. Oh,
it premieres today. Okay, so yes, beautiful. So tomorrow is when.
Tomorrow will be today. Yes,
will air. So by then.
By the time you see this, but we'll see how it goes. I mean, obviously, it's a film that you want as many people to see as possible. With every film. But you also want it to feel like really personal for somebody too.
Yeah.
More of like
well, in the absence of being able to travel as much as we like to, go see Blood, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you both. It's been really fun chatting with you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again.
The one that you're about to hear from the filmmakers on is called Midwives, and it takes place in a very remote part of Myanmar. And the filmmaker herself is from Myanmar. And we get an incredible glimpse into a female facility with raw footage, and I think it's a must-see for all of you. Let's show a clip from Midwives, please.
nó này là khu mua bên nó nó bố sợ কিছু না খায় nó কালা সকানে মুসলমান বাতানে না কিছু না খালো প্রনে কিছু না খায় যাব le no ma takli ma sa lo pro na no musulman hola bongla ka phila sala bongla ka la ma sala no mili sa ile ne ama musulman bata ko no mili so sa ma mai ba pa ke ala ay na ba to wala ay ko pre pro ni nga pro ni ka ma pro ko tin lo ni a me ma pa ke nga me ma pa ke swe thok lai ko nga khe chi ma ta nga khe ma lu tiao le ma tai bu no ila
I'm glad you were able to show that clip because it is definitely one of the more intense moments of the movie. Let's bring on, please, the director and producer of Midwives, Snow Hunin Line. Hello, Snow.
Hello, Janet.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. We would also like to bring on the producer, Mila Ong Thuyn, who himself also is half Burmese. Am I able to say that, or do I?
Yes.
Myanmar is the correct term. And thirdly, last but not least, we have the COO of Asia Society, Deborah Eisenman. She herself has been studying the region of Myanmar for many years and has some interesting perspectives to offer up. Hello, Deborah.
Hi, Janet. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Yes. Well, we're very, very fortunate to have all three of you on this particular panel because Myanmar is truly one of the more difficult to understand regions of the world. We know that many people have struggled to know it better. We're aware of the woman Aung San Suu Kyi, who has been in many ways the poster child for Myanmar, at least in terms of the Western community. Snow, please tell us what it is that motivated you to make this film.
In 2012, the Rohingya conflict was happened in Rakhine State. So like a million of Rohingya flee to Bangladesh, and there are 60,000 Rohingya still living with a Buddhist community. So that's new coming to me, and it was really hard to believe, like all these like hatreds and like fighting each other between two community. For me, it was hard to believe because I was born in Rakhine State. When I was little, these two community were friends and peaceful state, and then suddenly it all happened. And for me, I really wanted to understand what is really going on in my hometown. So that's the reason I went back to Rakhine State and trying to find out this story.
And you chose a particularly intense, very, very specific environment to shoot this movie. I mean, a place where women are giving birth in any region, anywhere, anytime would be already pretty remarkable. I think in this case, you portrayed a place that brought in Buddhists and Muslims, and the patients were cared for by Buddhists and Muslims. What did you find there when you were there? Is it what did you learn from spending the 5 years that you did covering this clinic?
Yes, when I start talking about making film in a conflict region, for me as a women filmmaker, I wanted to make a documentary about other women, because it would be more easier for me to understand from other women perspective views about this conflict. So like in the region, like I hear from some of my relatives, they were saying that Rohingya population is growing day by day because of like there is no birth control, and that's why a lot of population coming out. So that I had an idea that, okay, what are the midwife roles in the conflict region? And I had a script in my mind that I want to find two midwives, one Buddhist and one Muslim, working together in the same village. So I don't know any of two characters before I made this film. I just have this two characters in my mind, and then I contact my relative living in that region, and from my relative I found these two extraordinary two midwives in the region. Because I choose that region because that region was no civil war that time when I started this documentary, because also landscape is really beautiful, and I wanted to find out how coexistent like two women together from different backgrounds. That was my main idea.
Well, you definitely captured some incredible, very, very unique footage, getting so close to everything that's going on within this small clinic. It's extremely admirable, and you clearly developed a lot of trust from these women. Mila, how is it, Mila Ong Fin, how is it that you got involved in this project?
Well, my father's side of the family is from Myanmar, so I returned there a couple times, and in around 2015, I actually went to the same village where the film is shot, Niau, where all the big temples are, and I took my kids, and it always stayed with me that I wanted to return one day and make a film there. It was just such an interesting place. And then the violence broke out, and it was like, it's even more urgent. And I returned to Myanmar to teach documentary filmmaking, and I was paired with Snow. And then she showed me the footage that she'd been shooting. And I was like, wow, this is just fantastic. And then I just wanted to be a part of her project in any way I could. So we just sat together and looked at footage, and during our spare time, not teaching, we would be editing footage together, and that's how the relationship started.
Was there some footage in particular that you chose not to show, or how did you align on what was worth keeping in the movie?
We've had a really interesting editing process, partially because of the troubles in Myanmar and also because of COVID. But we tried remote editing together, and Snow basically laid out her vision. She put a 5-hour assembly of the film together, and we had one other editor on the project, and we would just go through footage and then send it back to her. And I don't think it's really sat right with Snow to be editing not face to face anymore, because we couldn't travel to each other's countries. So at one point she kind of demanded we have to sit together in the same room. So the only place that she was allowed to travel to and I was allowed to travel to was Bangkok, Thailand. So first we went there and edited under COVID lockdown for a couple months. And then later she was able to go to Germany. So now she's in Germany and I flew to Germany for a couple months. So we've been having this international ongoing debate of what goes in and what comes out of the film. But really, I just took her lead on what she had shot. Like in terms of sensitivity and like not including certain things, that wasn't the issue. We were really, I think Snow wanted to show the nuance between the relationship of the women. And the longer that she filmed for, the more that the metaphor of like what was going on in the country sort of paralleled the conflict in the women's lives. And so the more she filmed, the more sort of layers the film got. So it was almost easy in a way to identify the more interesting scenes, as long as we stay true to the characters. And like, these women love each other, but kind of hate each other and are forced to get along and are even in their own way are making, like in their own sort of conflict way, are making their village so much better and stronger. So I think that's what we really sort of focused on.
Well, that's what came through loud and clear, because it was very noble for this woman to open up this clinic and invite all to come. But you see how external circumstances inevitably are going to affect their dynamics. And it's a very stressful situation for anyone who's been through childbirth. It's almost like a crisis, the timing of everything and what's going to happen. And it's not just about births, there's other diseases and help that women need, but it's a high intensity environment, and to have that in a high intensity larger environment of what's happening in the country, I think was a very, very brilliant and poignant way to capture, I think, what is going on. Deborah, as someone who has traveled extensively to Myanmar, what did you make of this? And had you seen anything like this before? I imagine this is not the typical footage that you see coming out of Myanmar.
Exactly, Jenna. I mean, this was really a beautiful and compelling film, and I think really showed some of the dichotomy in Myanmar and some of the fragility in Myanmar. I'd like to talk about some of that fragility, if I may. Myanmar has been under nearly 50 years of military rule since its independence. And its independence was only in the 1940s. And during that time frame, we've seen kind of numerous so 50 years of military rule and then 13 years of kind of democratic transition starting in 2008. And in that time frame, there have been numerous political and economic developments and growth. But during this whole time, so 70 years basically, you've had a civil war raging throughout Myanmar between the military and a number of ethnic groups. One ethnic group that isn't counted in this kind of inter-ethnic warfare is the Rohingya, which is a Muslim population living mostly in Rakhine State that was seen as undocumented immigrants from Bangladesh mostly. And so there have been long waves of conflict against the Rohingya, but really reached a peak in 2017 when 700,000 Rohingya were driven out of Rakhine at the hands of mostly the military. So really compounding all of what I've laid out now is the military coup that happened a year ago, overthrowing the democratic government on the charges of election fraud. So in this past year, the economy has sunk, the healthcare sector is completely nearing break, and the military has killed 1,500 people and jailed thousands, and then COVID is raging through the country. So to me, seeing the film in the context of the complexity of Myanmar, the history of conflict conflict of Myanmar, the interethnic conflict of Myanmar. This film is really almost a triumph of these stories, of the fragile story of the Rohingya Muslim, of the fragile story of interethnic relations, interreligious relations in Myanmar. And showing that complexity, I think, in a really beautiful and compelling way. But I think taking that historical context in mind is really important. And I'm so glad this film is out there to show.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, again, so difficult to get those really intimate and very raw moments, regardless. And it's so many of the reactions are so unfiltered. Did you ever feel, Snow and Mila, in the course of making this film, that it was almost too much, or that you might not be able to continue, or it was going to be dangerous, or, these women are so brave and in some cases conflicted, and it really kind of tears at your heartstrings. What was it like to work with them over that long period of time?
Oh, for me, like when I started something, like when I started anything, I would be finished till the end. I will never quit. I'm not a quitting person, because I really wanted to tell this story through from my film language. Also, like I wanted to talk about, my country with this kind of story. That what I always wanted. So of course there are a lot of like conflict and civil wars going on, and a lot of fear when I was shooting in a Rakhine State. I never think about quitting. I want to finish it, and then I wanted to bring it to the war, because I wanted to prove that I'm a filmmaker, and I can make this kind of documentary film from Myanmar, not from there are a lot of documentary came up from Myanmar, made by foreign filmmakers. So I wanted to show the film made by Myanmar filmmaker.
You're a true warrior. Did the women themselves sometimes resist being filmed, or did they just say, well, we're in the middle of doing this, so come in? They seem to be so welcome. Your camera got so close to them, right in their faces. Was there ever any resistance?
Yes, they kind of like La and Nunu. They are also very strong, supported women. Of course, there are the moment that I had to leave from the village quickly because of the suddenly civil war happened, like during our shooting. So that moment that I listened to my characters and all the people living in the region, but I know that I can come back to the village for continuing my story, and I always have a communicate with two of my characters. They were always calling me. Sometimes I'm not in Rakhine State, but they become like my family. They become like my sister. So everything going through in a Rakhine State, even I'm sitting in Yangon, very safe, but I feel for them. Because they tell me everything. So it's like physically I was not there, but mentally I'm with my character.
What about you, Mila? Was there anything in particular that stands out about the making of this film that distinguishes it, either an obstacle or something very, very...
Well, I mean, at first I wasn't there for that, but at first the only resistance to Snow filming, besides like, the bosses and the police checkpoints and stuff, the characters, it took a little while before they understood what the difference was between a journalist and a long form documentary filmmaker. Like nobody in the world really knows the process of how do you make a documentary. Who in their right mind would come back every few months for 5 years and just keep filming me in the middle of nowhere? Like people don't understand that concept. So Snow has to sort of teach her characters what it is to make a film, which is essentially collaborative. Like they're writing the story of their own lives in their dialogue. We're not adding narration. So after a while, they start realizing, oh, we're making this film with Snow, and she's not just going to show up one day and put us on the news and make us look bad. It's like an effort that we're doing together, and we have input. So I think that's always interesting to know. And I mean, even now they probably they haven't seen the final film. So they had to trust her a lot that they would make something that's quite, representative. And then like you saw the footage of Pla's mother. in the film. And that was like something that Hala wanted to see her mother, you know, that wasn't even really shot with the intention of putting in the film. It was something that Hala just, you know, she's so happy that it was filmed. So that's like, to me, a very interesting. And then I found that in editing and it's like, hey, what about this footage? So it's something like I when I would look through the footage, I just found these moments of like real kinship, you know, between Snow and the women. And so it was like, I think that warmth comes out. That's why there's no filter when you're watching the cameras. There's no coldness. The only difficulty we had was, I mean, logistically, I guess, Snow, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, like every trip to the village was hard. But in the last year, we didn't have an ending to the film. And because of COVID and because of the coup, Snow was really unsure if she'd be able to return to get the final scenes of the movie, of which they're very, very important, you know, when they're all reflecting on everything. So that probably took about a year of waiting before you're able to go back, Snow, right? And film the final scenes. And then so Nyo-Nyo's little girl had grown up. So we see her born in the movie, and by the end, she's like a big girl, you know? So it's quite, that addition of time didn't completely hurt the film, but we were worried for a while there, like, will we be able to go back?
Yeah, that was true, because I wanted to add about why I cannot go back to Rakhine State for final shoot because of the COVID. Because of the COVID, I cannot travel to other states. But actually, in the Rakhine State, COVID was not a big issue because there was civil war happening in Rakhine State. That was a big issue. That's the reason I don't want to put any layer about COVID, because COVID was very small for them, like because for them it's like this civil war happening in the village, is they have been living in a danger situation. So yeah, I cannot go back. But when military coup happened in Myanmar in February, and civil war between Rakhine Army and Myanmar military, they stopped for shooting. They stopped they stop it for that moment. So when I hear from my co-writer, I immediately take a flight and I went back to Rakhine State, because that was that trip was like, I feel so safe. After long, after 3 years, I've been so much worried about all my safety, so much worry. But the last trip, the final trip, was super safe. Like I feel so peaceful in Rakhine State in a way, but actually not really peaceful, but somehow compared from other region in Yangon and other state, you know, Kayah State and Karan State, and compared from other region, Rakhine State become peaceful state. So it was like it was such a great time to go back. Yeah, I feel so safe, so that I can finish final shoot. Because in Rakhine State. But anyway, when I left from Yangon airport, it was so scary because no one was on the road because of the military coup. Everyone, no one is traveling. But somehow, like I hear that like flight to Rakhine State is running. So I immediately take that flight and I went back.
Well, as a documentarian, both of you are so experienced, you know to expect the unexpected, and you can't predict always what's going to happen. But it sounds like a couple of things. One is that you did encounter the danger, but you found a place that was safe. And it also sounds like something you may have experienced in past projects where there's perhaps a level of empowerment. And it will be interesting to see what happens when these women see themselves on screen and how that might change them, and whether that will help redouble their efforts and their commitment to having this clinic, which again, in and of itself is like an oasis in that part of the world. Do you know if they have any plans to see it? Is there any way that they'll be able to see it privately, perhaps?
Well, we have to be careful. And I mean, for now, I think we don't want to risk any screenings within the country. We're being kind of cautious. I think we're both optimists, though. Snow and I are both optimists, thinking that maybe the government situation will change that it's kind of untenable, but maybe we're too optimistic. We do have to eventually show them the film. I think maybe the worst case scenario would be one day Snow can travel back there and then, physically show them a copy just to them first. But in a way, like the way it started out, right? Snow, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that Snow promised at the beginning, we won't show this film in Myanmar. She told that to her characters because there was such a level of intolerance towards Muslims that even the idea of the film, people didn't want to even support the idea. That intolerance in the public now has changed. And I think a lot of it has to do with realizing is like the government wasn't telling the truth. So maybe one day, but it's really, I would say right now it's, we're trying to get the word out to the world.
Well, I think the world is ready to embrace a movie like this that shows such heroism on the part of these women, such strength and commitment and vigor, and it's quite remarkable. And that includes you, Snow, to have really traveled this journey at all costs. And I do hope people very much see the film and have at least a glimpse of a better understanding into this troubled area. Is there anything that we, meaning the audience, can do to in any way help the situation in Myanmar?
I mean, long-term, Snow, I think we've been thinking about this recently. We're trying to be cautious with our characters, but at some point soon before the film goes into wider release, I think we'll set up some kind of funding campaign where we can provide them with medical equipment for their clinics. Because as Snow has reported back, they're just always in a lack of everything. So we do want, maybe you could follow Snow on Instagram or us on Twitter, and then there's a Midwives Film Instagram account, and we'll follow up in the next few months with ways you can contribute or donate or something like that. I think that would be the best. Whenever they can get medical equipment donated or cash to buy it, I think that would be very strong.
Okay, that sounds like a really good plan. And you think you can get this equipment or funds to them?
Yeah, it's a little bit difficult to arrange like right now, but we will. We will
prevail as you did in making this film. Thank you both so much, and thank you, Deborah, for joining us. Please, everyone, go see Midwives. You will not be disappointed. It's a very, very rare glimpse into the workings of what it's like to be servicing women, and especially women in such a trying area. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very excited to introduce to you a filmmaker of a film made in the Philippines called Leonor Will Never Die. Let's take a quick look at this first. As you can see, the young filmmaker is named Martika Escobar. Martika, how are you?
Hi, Janet. Thanks for having me here.
Not at all. It's such a pleasure. I know it's early in the morning for you, but thank you for joining us. I was so fascinated by this movie because I wanted to know more. First of all, I thought, is Leonor a real person? You found such a wonderful actress to follow. And for those who haven't yet seen the movie, it's an action movie. There's a lot of gunshots and chasing and all the things that you want in an action movie, but done with a sensibility that is super fun. How is it that you came about to make this movie?
Right. Well, this movie started like 8 years ago. So I first thought of it like with a friend. We were in this workshop in the Philippines, and our lecturers for directing and all the other workshops came to class looking like characters from an action film. So that's just how they were in real life. So my friend and I wondered, like, why out of the hundreds of action films throughout Philippine history, why aren't there any about an action grandma? So we just thought, like, why not like create this action grandma character? And I just thought of like adding an extra layer to her story by turning her into an action film writer who gets transported into her own film, which she will be writing and revising as it's happening. So yeah, that's how it started, but that's not how it ended, since it's like 8 years ago when I first thought of it.
Well, it's a very, very clever concept, the film within the film within the film. In fact, there were several times I was like, wait, is this happening or is this in the film? Because it's so cleverly sewn together, how you have the action in her life, you know, mirroring the action in the movie or vice versa. How did you find your grandma?
Well, the actor or the character?
I meant the actor. The actor. Is she very well known?
Okay, the actor.
Do you have her in mind?
See,
From the beginning?
Sheila Francisco is a like accomplished theater actress here and abroad. But I first heard about her through my producers. They saw her in a play and they told me that like I should have her read. And then when I had her read, she just like embodied the persona of the Leonor I had in my mind and on paper. So when she read it, I felt that the character was alive, and that's like a big part of how I casted people for this film. When they read and they made it me feel that the character was alive. I just saw that maybe they're good for this big project. So I mean, it's not a big project; it's a small project, but it's a long and
it's actually a pretty big project. I mean, it's not a movie that's just set in one location with just a few people talking. There's a lot of action. Did you end up casting any of those lecturers that showed up for class in their action like leather gear and whatnot? I mean, that would have been very ironic, right?
I know I should have. I mean, I'm too shy to like ask them because they're my teachers and my mentors. But a lot of the scenes in the film and a lot of the characters are inspired by how they are, even the location.
How they are, or how they had you seen their films, their action films before you took their classes, or do you mean how they actually behaved in real life? See, everything's so reality and
fiction
cinema.
and reality.
The boundaries are blending.
It's both, Janet. Because the people working for it, they call it the Mole Fund Institute. They used to be people who worked in the action film industry from the 80s and 70s up to the 90s. So you'd see posters in action film posters in the workshop place. And they like to talk about their past a lot. So that's like one of the inspirations of the film also, because it's how films affect us as people, especially because growing up, our president was a former action star. So there's also that fact.
Well, we've had presidents that were former stars too, former movie stars. That's happened in governors. So it's not altogether unfamiliar, but I believe that action movies have dominated your industry over the years and decades. Is that correct? Is that changing somewhat now? I mean, yours is much more than just an action film, though it obviously has its roots in that. What's happening in the Philippine industry at this moment?
Well, at this moment, I think people are more open to like different forms of movies, more unconventional forms such as this. I mean, the action genre pace during the 70s, 80s, and even 90s. It's not, we don't produce as much action films anymore, but I just noticed that there's like a more diverse range of films nowadays, and people are more open-minded into,
Do you think your films are very much influenced, because a dominant area in Asia, especially when it comes to action films, was Hong Kong? Do you think your films were influenced by, not yours in particular, but the Filipino industry? Was it influenced by Hong Kong films, do you think?
Perhaps, because I think we sort of borrow the trends from our neighbors and other regions in Asia. So I think it's like a shared, how do you say it? It's like a shared sensibility. And a lot of it is addressed on how action films were made. So the action films in the Philippines would look like Filipino remakes of like American action movies.
And this is your first feature, or your first feature, as I recall? That's extraordinary. What did you do when you heard that you got into the Sundance Film Festival?
It's my first feature, but when I got the invitation, I really didn't believe it. I thought it was a rejection letter because it's so far-fetched to think that we're part of Sundance. But once I realized that it's real, which was just like a few days ago when we had our premiere, I just decided like, oh, maybe this is real. I just can't help but feel grateful and thankful every time. And also, I feel extra lucky. But I'm really happy for our team because they really worked a lot for this film. It's a labor of love, really, of friends, family, everyone around.
Well, it is a major feat. I'm sure we're all aware that there aren't as many women directors as there ought to be. There's a huge inequality there. And the fact that you were able to get this going and work in a genre that is usually reserved for men is an incredible feat, and from a country that in general doesn't have a lot of films going to festivals. I think there was a time where Lina Broca was a Filipino filmmaker that everybody knew about, but there haven't been too many others that really popped. The Basco brothers work here, and in this day and age, there is a lot of camaraderie between Asians from all over, and that's a really wonderful thing. And we've gotten over the fear of subtitles, and people seem to really enjoy actually and relish films in different languages. So I think the arrival of Leonora Will Never Die is just a testament to all of this. I assume the reception at Sundance, meaning, since you've screened it, has been very positive. What have you learned about the reception?
So far, people have been extra nice. My team and I are always wondering, why are people so nice to us? I think a big factor is because it's a joyful film. And I mean, the pandemic has this effect on us that makes us want to find sources of sanity and joy. And I think this film, even intention-wise, is a film that I want people to find joy in. So I think that's like one of the reasons why we've been getting a lot of love and support. And also the Filipino community, they have been like really supportive because it's geo-blocked here in the Philippines. So not a lot can watch from here.
Oh,
that's why at first I was worried like people might not see our film because I don't have any American friends and stuff. But yeah, we had a producer like help us launch this film in the US just so more people can watch it.
I see. So it's temporarily geo-blocked in the Philippines until there's a wider release, or is there something about the content that will make it difficult to show in the Philippines in the end?
Sundance in general is geo-blocked. It's just to US only. So all regions outside the US can't really like access it. Unless you have like VPN and others.
When will that change, if ever?
I don't know. It's the Sundance's. I think it's their
Sundance. Okay, I understand. So it's just because for the moment it's at Sundance. Yes, but there's nothing. I was afraid you were going to say there was something controversial or whatever, because I certainly didn't see it. But and are you hoping to get global distribution with the film now?
I hope so. We have a sales agent on board. It's Circumon, and so far they've been like looking for more homes for our film. But really, what I'm looking forward to is the screen in the Philippines, because I think, the Filipino people will understand this film in a different light.
Way. Well, it does feel like a love letter to the Philippines and to the culture and society, and also incorporating some of the history of the Filipino film industry, which I'm sure will be delight. But that doesn't mean that people outside of the Philippines can't appreciate it. And I think what I've seen in the last several years that is so heartwarming is how receptive people are. They want to imbibe different cultures and really learn, and understand why something was made somewhere, and and indulge in the differences or the similarities. But there isn't the same kind of mental block for people now. I think there's a lot of openness, and we truly are a global community. And you're definitely making Philippines proud of themselves. So, what do you have anything in mind for your next projects?
I do have like a couple of scripts in development, and they're all, I think, stories that are very local but also very universal in theme. I guess like Leonor Will Never Die. So I hope to like make it in the next not 8 years, hopefully like less than 8.
Well, it's as if you've carved out a niche for yourself, if that's what you want to continue doing, because, again, local. And I think this is what many people aspire to, make something that feels very authentic to the local culture, but still has worldwide appeal. Who are some of your greatest influences as filmmakers?
My greatest influence is Agnes Varda. She's like my peg as a human being and as a filmmaker. So. And
what is it that you like most of all about her films?
I like how she sees the big things in life through little things, like objects in her house, through cats, through farming. And she just seems to, it feels like an accessible philosopher whenever I watch her film. So that's something like I aspire to be. I like to make simple looking films, but meaningful ones that sort of communicate well with people.
She was a couple of years ago, the Academy of Motion Pictures did honor her with the Governor's Award. And then sadly she passed away shortly thereafter. So it was really fun to be with her. She was a queen. Everybody was gathered around her, and so appreciative of her presence. Yeah. Is there anyone else? What's that?
Even in person, is she like much like how she is in her
Very
films?
much.
Oh, wow.
I would say identical. Anybody else that you care to mention?
My favorite film of all time is Harold and Maude by Hal Ashby, which also has this like existential core to it. I do like Asian filmmakers such as Chai Ming Liang. My favorite local film is Bernal's Pagdating sa Dulo. I don't know what you call it in English, but and Kidlat Tahimik's Perfume Nightmare. So
it's interesting. I was just Go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was just interviewing. Yeah, go ahead.
You were interviewing Kidlat.
No, I was thinking about because Simon Liang, and I was interviewing Brad Gray and So Young Kim, who made this film called Blood, and their biggest influences were from Taiwan. It was Hou Xiaoxian and Simon Liang and Edward Yang, and it's very interesting because I think it is easier to be influenced by people who are from a similar region. There's something about the Asian sensibility, perhaps, and that kind of oozes through the films. It's hard to kind of put your finger on it, but I'm not surprised.
True.
Those are your influences.
I just can't help but be influenced by them. There's also a Pichat Pong and
yes.
So
well,
but Kidlat is an influence really. How he uses the form to tell a really personal story that's also engaging at the same time.
I think one day people could very well be saying Martika was a great influence on me because you are a pioneer, being a female filmmaker, working in the Philippines, again, making an action movie. Now, you mentioned Harold and Maude. Did you grow up in a large family with elders in your family?
I grew up in a small family. I'm an only child, which is the reason why I used to watch a lot of films. Like people would just like at home, I'd have nobody to talk to, just the TV. So I see it like as a friend. And my family really enjoys the arts and the movies. My grandparents, they would, because in the Philippines, senior citizens can enter the cinemas for free. So my grandma and grandpa would like watch all the films in the whole year. So they're really movie people.
One of my friends is the Filipino journalist Jose Antonio Vargas, and I helped him make his film Documented about his journey in America, where it turns out he doesn't have official documents, but the parts of the film that I love the most are with his family, not just his mother, but his grandparents. And the way he speaks about them is in such a loving way. I've forgotten the name now of grandma and grandpa, but in dialogue. What is it called?
It's a film in development, or is it a film that's out?
It's actually made. It was made about 5-6 years ago, I think. It was called Documented. It's a documentary called Documented.
Called Documented.
Called Documented, Jose Antonio Vargas. And I really got a peek into a Filipino family life through him and this footage that I saw of the way he interacted with his family. He has quite a large family, many of whom are here now. But it's been such a wonderful journey to learn. And this year at Sundance, there are films from so many places, from Myanmar, from Philippines. It's one about a Korean American. There's fantasy films, and I'm just so pleased that we've been able to really stretch our wings and explore so many different genres. And yours definitely falls into that category of breaking new ground, I think.
Thank you. I'm so happy that Sundance is so open to like different regions and people.
Yeah. Well, the world is changing. The world is really changing, and it's really flattening in a lot of ways. And there's kind of more of an even playing field. And I think they recognize that. There are more films from Asia this year than ever. And I think furthermore, the viewing habits of the audience have shown that there's no just one way, or that we should break the conventions, because being authentic is a very, very important thing for audiences. And that means voices can come from anywhere. So, well, I really applaud your first feature. How many people get to say first feature is at Sundance Film Festival? So everyone, please go see Leonor Will Never Die in the World Cinema Dramatic Competition. From the Philippines, Martika Escobar, filmmaker extraordinaire, who is, I'm sure we're going to be seeing your name on other works down the road. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Janet. Enjoyed talking with you.
And yes, we'll see you in another Sundance or somewhere. Come visit us in the US.
Hopefully. Yes. And thanks also to Quark for connecting us, right?
Yes. Quark. Who is Quark, by the way?
I don't know. He just told me about you. He was the one who linked you.
That's so funny,
our executive producer.
Because I wanted to include as many films from Southeast Asia as possible. And I saw David Magdale, who's a publicist, was promoting your film. And I thought he was officially representing. I said, David, I want to get in touch with the filmmaker of Leonor Will Never Die. And he's like, oh, I don't even represent it. He was just, as a fellow Filipino, I think he wanted to promote the film. And then he put me in touch with Quark, and
yes,
and it's
like such a tight community of like Asians.
There's an amazing thing happening now. No, we're very supportive of one another, and we're always connecting. And this has been more so the case in the last several years. It's been fantastic. And I couldn't be happier about it, because I started many years ago when there wasn't a community, and now I would say there really is a community, and we are making a difference. And I think that one of the reasons, and Kim Utani, who's the main programmer for the festival, is Japanese American. So we are popping up everywhere.
I love it. I'm like here in Manila, and it feels like I'm there. I just like David also helping us promote the film, and like, wow, everyone's so sweet and so nice. and
No,
support.
we're just so happy to have more representation. We're kind of floating on cloud nine every time something, surfaces that seems really worthy. So thank you again for joining us, and good luck. Good
Thanks,
luck.
Janet.
Take care.
All
Bye.
right. Bye-bye.
I'm really excited to introduce the following film and filmmaker. The film itself is called TikTok Boom, and the filmmaker is Shalini Kantaya. And it is a really informative but kind of explosive look at the state of at least one social media platform. Let's look at this brief teaser of the film. So we're joined today by Shalini and one of the women who is featured in the film, Ray Ma, who is an expert in the field of Chinese tech and runs a podcast called Tech China Buzz. Shalini, I watched your film actually several times because there was so much in there. And it starts out with these incredible profiles of how a group of influencers were basically changed overnight. Their lives, they woke up one morning, they posted something kind of innocently like, oh, this might be cool. And before they knew it, they had millions of followers. Tell me how you decided first to choose those particular influencers that you profiled.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I have to say that I set out to tell the story of TikTok through Gen Z influencers because they are the inherent experts on the inventive use of the platform. And I sought out characters whose lives were changed in some way by being on the app and whose stories sort of illuminate bigger themes. Whether it's for Rosa and the way that her story highlights content moderation, or Deja talking about influencer mental health. And so I feel like each influencer sort of highlighted, a different theme that I think it's important to shine a light on.
Well, each of those stories were so captivating and so personal. Feroza is the first one, and this showed the positive side of a platform like TikTok. She's from Afghanistan. She was always very proud of her culture, but didn't feel like there were other people outside of her family that she could share her life with. And then one day she puts on an Afghan dress and she gets quite a few likes, and then off she was running. And that to me is, so we see how people can build tribes and communities off of something like that. And apparently she found many, many other people from Afghanistan. In the case of someone like Spencer X, just through beatboxing, he gained quite a large following. So it's all very fascinating. And the first half of the movie, I think, does an amazing job of exploring how, again, they were able to just blow up overnight. And you feel like, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with this, but then your movie very adroitly takes a turn and talks about some of the deeper implications and complications of having such a life. Why don't you describe a little bit about what we learned both in the case of Feroza and Deja and Spencer, just a superstar that everybody loves. But other lives have been somewhat complicated.
Well, I think that, what I sought to see is sort of pull the curtain back and say, how does this algorithm actually work? And I think I loved the history that Ray gives about that shows that this was like how a tiny startup began and how they had this crazy idea of building sort of recommendation algorithms. And I thought it was important to introduce characters like the founders in a way that was sort of in keeping with the sort of mythologies around Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg. And to me, it is, with Spencer and Feroza and Deja, it is this sort of algorithm that catapults their work in these different areas and sort of changes their lives accordingly. And so the film sort of seeks to explore and pull back the curtain on the algorithm itself and how it works.
And how would you characterize what distinguishes the TikTok algorithm from others? Forgive this intrude.
Well, as a my non-scientific answer as just someone who's used the app is that it's just highly addictive and incredibly astute, and almost to the point where it just knows your quirks. Like it was giving me like New York restaurants, cryptocurrency, like sort of life hacks. Like it almost knows, I mean, in the film, you joke that it sort of knows your thoughts. And I think that what is different about the algorithm is that it does this with very little inputs. It's not you choosing your preference. It's literally, it's like watching you watch, and it comes to know you with that kind of accuracy. And I think that's...
Well, what I gleaned from it is that it uses a highly sophisticated facial recognition system, so that your eyes lighting up or a slight, smile on your face as you don't have to click or like or do anything, but that it manages to absorb what's going on in your face, and therefore perhaps in your mind. One of the influencers actually says, I was thinking about something, and then the ads came in or the videos came in or whatever. So that is clearly something that has been developed in a very, very, very advanced way. And if that's the case, here in the West, many people shun the idea of facial recognition for various reasons, but we seem to relish it when it comes to TikTok, because they know us better than we may know ourselves at times. So I found that to be interesting. And that's what you start delving into in the second half of the movie, the origins of TikTok, the fact that it's, it was started by someone from China with the intention, in fact, of going global. And that's where Ray Ma comes in. So Ray, who's been in this area, studying this area and being an expert on it for so many years, how did you find her, and what did Ray reveal to you in the course of making the film?
Well, I found her through her very insightful podcast, Tech Buzz China. Is that correct? And then sought her out to be part of the film, and she was incredibly knowledgeable about the history of ByteDance as a company.
Wonderful. Ray, what would you say? What kind of perspective were you able to offer Shalini?
Oh yeah, I'm definitely not a heavy TikTok user. And as we were just discussing before on the prep call, I don't follow any of these famous influencers that Shalini was able to capture as part of the film. So mine's purely from sort of a business perspective on ByteDance's success in their international expansion, and looking at their innovative strategies, and looking actually going forward, if, as we were discussing, if I think maybe there are other Chinese companies that are going to be looking at replicating their success. So those are the primary topics that I spend a lot of time thinking about and doing research on.
What is it that you were able to share about ByteDance in particular that was helpful to Shalini?
Well, I think at the time, if I remember, I gave a lot of background information on ByteDance, the company, the founders, the environment that they were operating in when they first got started, and because TikTok is not their first success, right? So by the time they were coming to the West or just outside of China in general with TikTok, they were already a quite established company in China. They were considered one of the sort of second tier internet giants, the first tier being Alibaba, Tencent, Baidu, and right below them there was, ByteDance, Meituan, and Didi. So they were considered like a very, very big and formidable internet company already. And interestingly, in 2018, actually, Zheng Yiming, the founder of ByteDance, had predicted very publicly in an interview that he was hoping that his personal goal for the company was to reach over 50% users coming from outside of China by 2021. And I think they've largely achieved that, which is very, very surprising for a Chinese company to have that kind of ambition, back in 2016, 2017, when they were expanding overseas, and then actually achieve it. So that's also something that I think I try to highlight as part of the information to Shalini.
I do wonder if others didn't also have that ambition. I think Alibaba had that ambition based on conversations I've had with Jack Ma and others, but it's been very difficult. It's been very difficult because of cultural differences, or in some cases maybe political ones. But I think what platforms do is it just allows for it's user-generated content. So it's not trying to sell something that feels too Chinese to America, or sell something in a way that feels Chinese to America, or vice versa, whatever. It really is, I think many users may not be aware that it's a China invented company. Would you say that is the case, Shalini?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Rayma and others helped me understand is just a little bit of the broader landscape of China tech. And I think that many people in the US may not understand that China is a major world leader in artificial intelligence technology. And I think that I wish I had more time in the film to give sort of background, because I think that background is actually fascinating. The fact that AI industries grew up almost completely independent from the West. And because of that, I think innovation has thrived in a way, and maybe even sometimes outpacing the West, or dare I say it, many times. And so I think that is fascinating for me to be, because I think that what I came to understand is that a lot of people's issues with TikTok, or a lot of the people raising issue with TikTok, were these Silicon Valley companies that feared the competition.
Well, I loved those scenes, the very ironic scenes of seeing Mark Zuckerberg at first wanting to buy TikTok, and then suddenly deciding it was the enemy, and we see him trying to speak Chinese rather poorly, I would say. But nevertheless, he had gotten he had meetings with the very high level leaders. So, we're living in a time now, and those of us who have been marinating for a long time in the China space, we're very, very aware of the flip-flop in terms of public attitude, government policy, and everything else that comes with it. So, we're on a Zoom now. Most people are not thinking, oh, this was also created by a gentleman from China. TikTok was created in China. And instead, as you so rightly point out in your film, there have been times where TikTok has been used as a symbol for what we, should not be doing, because there's already too much interaction with China. But really, the idea that it could be shut down at this point seems a little preposterous. I mean, the popularity and the number of people who are relishing the platform is just become too great. So it's a little bit out of control in a sense. You know, the people have spoken. They love this app. And the ramifications of trying to shut it down, I think would be far too great for any one person to take on. That's my feeling watching the film. And again, it's so informative. I mean, do either of you have a prediction about the future of this particular platform, or perhaps just the intense interaction that's already going on between China and the US, despite the fact that governments on both sides are trying to keep us farther apart? Okay, not everyone at once. No.
Shalini, you want to go first?
No, please.
Okay, sure. I'll go first, and then maybe I'll just talk about just ByteDance and TikTok, the business. I think that again, to emphasize, TikTok is sort of ByteDance's. We could say it's third hit product. The first two having been released in 2012 and 2016 in China, respectively, and accounting for over 90% of ByteDance's revenues at present. And ByteDance is, by the way, a very large company at this point. Its revenue was rumored to be $58 billion last year. That's basically half of Facebook's. And so for ByteDance, I'm predicting that it's going to take a lot of the, plays that it's seen succeed in China and sort of just it's using time travel as sort of an arbitrage, right? Where it's taking things that it's done in China maybe 3-4 years ago and then importing them into international markets, of course, with modifications. But some of those things that we see happening is, number one, it's not just an app for, Gen Z. And we're already seeing that in the West, but in China, we're talking about this being short video being a primary use of time, even for senior citizens, right? So that's not quite happening, I would argue, here in the West yet. But if that were to happen, then that would be a lot more time spent, a lot more users on the app, where short video fundamentally becomes a way that people spend time online, right? Much like, it just becomes its own very distinct form of media. The second thing is we see that in China, the TikTok equivalent has really changed music. The music industry and the breakout of new brands, where that becomes the place where they choose to debut versus and go viral, right? Versus more traditional forms of media. That's starting to happen in the US. You see reports that advertising agencies are increasing their budgets for TikTok, but that's still very small relative to what we see in China. We're talking about people increasing it from 5% of their budget to 10 or maybe 15%. That's still not the leading place where they're spending money. I predict that will change. And the third thing is e-commerce. That's something TikTok is experimenting with globally, has been a little bit more successful in China. And that's, I think, just a huge market, especially when you consider that just overall, China is the most advanced e-commerce market in the world with the highest penetration, between 30 and 45%, depending on which market report you're using. And then US is actually something like half of that, even with all the pandemic increases. So we can see that if TikTok were to go into e-commerce and make big moves there, like we've seen in in China, it's going to be really, really interesting. And that would explain why a lot of Silicon Valley companies are very, very concerned about their aggressive expansion.
Thank you, Ray. That's very, very interesting. Shalini, you have anything to add to that?
Well, I'll just sort of zoom out and just share a few things that I think the growth of TikTok indicates. And I think that what I've learned is that every generation is going to have its new tech. I feel that this generation is as disconnected from Facebook as any other, I mean, they want nothing to do with the platform. And so I think that tech is going to rapidly change. I think vertical video and short video is here to stay, as is these really powerful recommendation algorithms that know us better than ourselves and think, would you like to listen to this next? Do you want this film next? I feel like that really powerful with almost no inputs, that way of choosing for people seems to be a trend that's here to stay. The other thing that I've seen in the making of this film is that there is a trend for younger and younger users who have become the most valuable audience for social media companies, like TikTok, Instagram, all targeting YouTube, all targeting kids. And it seems, and that TikTok happened to be an app that came from China, but maybe next year one will come from some other country, and we will have to grapple with the same issues and values, value differentials of where these systems are made that we're using. And so it's my hope that we start to think about common rules or what would it look like to have some global data rules, to have some common rules, because these companies are so global and moving across borders that reflect our shared values.
Oh, I hear you so strongly on that front. I mean, at this point in our lives, it is so obvious that we are a global community and everything that happens is affected and is affecting of other people in other lands. And yet we're so not coordinated. We should have global regulations about climate change and about information and disinformation, so many other things. Is it possible that a platform like TikTok will help advance that notion? I mean, do you think there's something we can do? Because these, while there is a big generation gap, and I lament that because, I am so far from the Gen X, but, is there a way, do you think, that these platforms can actually bring people together? Because I liked what you said, Ray, that in the future, it won't be for just Gen X, perhaps, if we follow the lead of China, that it can expand. Do you think that this is a possibility? Because that would be awfully nice to be able to feel more connected to different generations.
I can just jump in really briefly about at least what we're seeing in China. I think that a platform like TikTok that makes it easier for just content creators of all colors and stripes to get on and create and distribute. I think that it's possible. The platforms do have to do some work in in getting the creators on board and really making this a comfortable community for them through rules and subsidies and whatnot. But for example, some of the creators I follow on the Chinese version of TikTok are people I would never have met in real life. They're from different age groups. There are these senior women who are living their best retired life, and then there are also these people living in rural China who are living entirely different lives that I would never encounter otherwise. So I think overall, in general, if we are, there has to be a balance between what the platform does in terms of, recommending you and then getting you out of that bubble that you create with your own preferences, right? I think ByteDance is somewhat aware of this. I don't know if they're doing the best job possible, but this is a topic that is hotly debated in the tech community when it comes to recommendation engines in general. And I'm personally a techno optimist, so I'm hopeful that there will be more connection and collaboration and understanding if we use technology the right way. So, but maybe there does need to be some rules around it as well. Maybe some global rules. I'm not sure.
What do you think, Shalini? And what is your hope for what the audience takes away from this film. You know, you present so many amazing questions in a way through the information that's revealed, and you really create an incredibly balanced portrait of the good. I can't help but relish the fact that the Trump rally was almost empty after 1 million tickets were sold, you know, and that all came through on TikTok. I mean, do you see that as being something that's more pervasive in the future? And what is it that you want to leave audiences with after this amazing amalgamation of material that you've collected?
Well, I think that I hope that audiences become more literate about how these systems work. I hope there's a little bit more cultural understanding about some of the conflict surrounding TikTok. And, you know, that there'll be some sort of dialogue, because I just think the conversations are really important to have. And then I hope that people will think about, I mean, for me, I do believe in rules because I think that they help us have the benefits of technologies without the harms. And so I hope it really helps us all think about what our values are and how our technology can better reflect our values. And when it comes to big technology companies, how we can demand more transparency and more accountability from all these companies.
I hear you on that. You've had your premiere at Sundance already. I'm so sorry. I wished I could have seen this in Park City with an audience. I just think that would have been a really gratifying experience. Nevertheless, you've had your premiere, I believe. And what kind of response have you had so far?
We had a wonderful premiere at Sundance virtually on Sunday, and the cast was there, Spencer X and Feroza and Deja, and it was just fantastic to connect and tap into a little of the energy, though we also miss being in the theater with the audience and seeing it on a big screen.
And what did they think watching the film? I assume they'd seen it before in any
They
case.
all love the film. They all love the film. They've been wonderful supporters of the film.
Mm-hmm. And I believe is Feroza still active on TikTok? You mentioned that she's in college.
No,
now.
I haven't checked with her. She's, I think, active as a first year college student. So I know that that's her main focus.
Yeah, hopefully not too active. That's college is supposed to take some of your time. I know we saw towards the end that Spencer X is a superstar, even on Hollywood Boulevard.
Absolutely, and continues to be.
So he seems all set. He's probably doing branded, content for the rest of his life if he wants. And what about Deja?
Deja is also a college student at Columbia and is also doing brand deals and help support and is still supporting herself and her mom through
amazing.
TikTok.
Amazing. Those are all really interesting and different motivations for staying on the platform. But I thought that was such a beautiful array of their different journeys. And so to me, the film, it's the marvel of the film is that you're able to show a very microcosmic view of these individuals, but also on a macro level. I can't stop thinking about what this means for just social media in general, but also geopolitics, the US and China relations being so distraught now, and how we're so intertwined, and mostly a term that I've been reading about called hyperobject, which is something Adam McKay discusses in, or at least tries to portray in his film Don't Look Up. It's this feeling of things are so big and so seemingly out of our control. Maybe someone like Ray has a better handle on what's going on, but ordinary lay people I feel like we're just constantly catching up, and things are happening without our ability to necessarily even understand in the moment what is happening. It's so big and so far reaching in every way. I thought I might just ask you, do you have the same anxiety I do about about the, whether it be what's happening in AI or just the sort of the global issues that we're all facing, and yet not being able to come together as a global community. And that's why in a way, I feel like TikTok is in an ideal world, and I tend to be an optimist. In the utopian world, TikTok would be a way to bring people together, because it clearly shows China not just being a place where manufacturing is done. For so long, people have seen it as being, that's where we got cheap labor, and now clearly it's showing itself to be. And people who are very well educated know that there's a lot of innovation coming out of China, but I think in many people's minds it's not yet there, and so don't see the future trends as well. I mean, what do you think? I guess I'm asking such a broad question, but what do you see as being as happening in the near future in regards to China and the US, if it's possible to say?
Well, I think when it comes to, I think that we are two countries that are incredibly dependent on one another and have a very close economic relationship. And it's in our own interest for there to be some sort of cooperation and communication. And I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, I think that China is actually quite what's said in the film, a force to be reckoned with when it comes to artificial intelligence. And so I think that when it comes to this industry, these are the two countries that are really leading the race for AI, I would say.
Well, as someone in your film outright says that China is going to own the future. I mean, that's obviously an opinion that may be shared by some. Is what do you think, Ray, about that?
I probably wouldn't make a statement like that. I think China has great plans to, quote unquote, own the future, especially when it comes to technology and science. But I think that if you look realistically at the current state of affairs, the US has quite a leg up on most of the emerging technologies. In fact, that is what's driving, right, China's push, because it realizes it's behind and that the US could come in and, pull a Huawei and basically put in some sanctions and then have cut China off of access to these technologies that the US has unique sort of hold on. So I think it's something that, is worth talking about and is worth being concerned about in the future. And I absolutely, being a resident of Silicon Valley, grew up here, would love to see Silicon Valley, my home, continue to be dominant in tech. But I also recognize that's probably not possible, and that the entire world is going to globalization and more capital and talent and and tech itself is what's enabling actually other ecosystems to catch up. I think overall that's probably a good thing for the world, right? When we have more innovation happening. Whether or not, the US can remain quote, quote, number one, I think probably even if we were to, we won't be as dominant, or at least number two won't be as behind as they are now. It'll just become a more equal footing, and US can maintain some advantages if we continue to have supportive policies and are smart about how we govern, and also need a little bit of luck. If not, then we still won't be too far behind. So I'm optimistic about that as well. So I don't know that we need to concede, defeat to China or anything like that, or even if that's a helpful way of looking at it for the sake of all humanity.
It doesn't have to be a zero-sum game,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So, and it is really fascinating. For so long, so many companies in America were we're very interested in getting a piece of the China market, and so for a Chinese company to get a big piece of the American market, it's good to have some balance in that regard. Shalini, I'd like to just close by asking you, when can other people see this movie? Do you have any plans for it yet, or are you still waiting to hear from distributors? I know that it will be one that many people will relish, as I did.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Well, you can see it at the Sundance Film Festival until January the 28th. And the film is seeking distribution, and until then it will be on the festival circuit.
Is there anything you want to share about future projects of yours? You're already a prolific documentarian and such a good one. So we want to see more works of yours. Anything?
I am working on another film, but let's first get this one through its premiere.
I totally get it. Well, good luck with this and with that. And thank you both so much for being on this Zoom with us. It's really quite a memorable movie that I'll be thinking about for a long time to come as things continue to change. Everyone go see Tick Tock Boom.
Thank you so much, Janet, for taking us through all of those wonderful films, and congratulations to all of the filmmakers. And thank you to the Sundance Film Festival and our contacts, Tiffany and Divya. Thank you to our sponsors, Julia Gao, Josh Elks, and Asia Society at the Movies. Thank you to our Asia Society colleagues, Rexel Uy, Carolyn Tai, James Gale, Angela Chung, Michelle Flor-Cruz, Anjali Sharon, and Rahul Devaskar. And a big thank you again to Janet. A lot of work went into curating these discussions, and we really appreciate you. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Asia Society SF, and from all of us at Asia Society, thank you for joining us.